You all to stand for the pledge. And Ms. Marmion, if you would please lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now, if I could ask us to stand for just a moment and keep in our thoughts, minds, and prayers the passing of Mary Rousseau. Mary, as many of you know, owned the Sturgis Cottage on Mill Plain Green. I think she was the fourth generation that lived there. It's one of the icons in Fairfield in terms of architecture, and it was opened on many different occasions to members of our community to go through. I was a frequent guest, I guess, at their annual Christmas party, and absolutely loved the cottage and loved Mary's hospitality. So I'd ask you to keep her in mind. All right, thank you. And then I'd like to turn the floor over to Wednesday's pet and former First Selectman Sherry Stenick. Sherry, what do we have today?
We have a Maltese mix named Lucy. Lucy's about 5 or 6 years old, very friendly and active. And she may or may not be spayed. She looks like she's had some recent surgery, so we think she has. And she can be, she'll be available as of the 7th. So if anybody is interested in this delightful dog, who is probably going to be groomed by then, please come to 211 One Run Highway and come see her and grow up. Thank you.
All right, Sherry, thank you very much. All right, next up, item number 4, to consider and act upon the minutes of regular meeting October 21st, 2015. May I have a motion to accept?
Motion to accept.
A second. Any amendments or edits to the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. All right, the fun part of this meeting, Restaurant Week prize drawings. Let me say a few words and then we'll get on with the drawings. Today we want to take a few minutes and recap our recently conducted Fairfield Restaurant Week and to hold a prize drawing for the grand prize and a special prize in connection with our passport promotion. I want to ask my fellow selectmen to help me with the honors, but before we do, I want to thank everyone who helped make our 4th annual Fairfield Restaurant Week such a rousing success. Fairfield Restaurant Week has quickly become something of a tradition, something to look forward to each year, and each year it gets better and better. Thanks to Economic Development Director Mark Barnhart. Mark, thank you. We had a record 41 restaurants participating this year, and the word is out, Fairfield is the in place for dining. I want to thank our many fine restaurants for participating and for showcasing our cuisine and for showcasing the rest of Fairfield while folks are out getting dinner. I especially want to thank our sponsors, Bankwell, and Mr. Robert Palermo is here. Bob, thank you. You guys have been here right from the start, and you continue to help us out. Thank you very much for that. Our grand prize contributor, the Delamar Southport Artesian Restaurant and the Spa at the Delamar. Jackie Kosovo, is Jackie here? No? Okay, she must be showing up later. And our special prize contributor, the Grey Goose, and Tommy Fabrio. So without further ado, let's find out who won. First up is a special prize dinner for 4 at the Grey Goose Restaurant. Kevin, do you want to do the drawing? I'll turn and you can reach in and pick it out. And Sheila, you're going to do the next one, so be ready.
Okay.
Where's the accounting firm to keep an eye on?
If you can stand over here, because there's a microphone there in front of your name tag. So when you read the winner, we want you to read. I can do this without breaking it. Okay, you ready?
You bet. All right, so I will turn my head and I will reach deep.
And while Kevin's doing that, I'm going to point out that this is the first up is our special prize dinner for 4 at the Grey Goose Restaurant in Southport.
And the winner is Roseanne Young of Fairfield, Connecticut.
All right. Got to support our residents. All right. We can. Sheila, come on up.
Okay.
You're next. You'll just stand in front here.
Okay.
Should we close this up and do it some more?
Oh, yeah. There you go. Yeah.
All right, let's make sure it doesn't come out. Then we'll do this. Go ahead, why don't you open that up?
Okay.
And finally, the fabulous grand prize of a night stay deluxe accommodations at the Delamar Southport plus dinner for two at the acclaimed Artesian Restaurant and a couple's massage at the spa of the Delamar. So,
Ready?
for the drawing?
Okay. We have Olga Voros of Fairfield, Connecticut.
All right, again, very good. Great, we took care of 2 residents. Way to go.
All right.
I like this. This is,
Thank you to St. Pius for the...
oh, St. Pius?
Yes.
That's quite a machine.
We'll move this out of the way.
All right, if you didn't hear that, thank you to St. Pius for our drum and barrel with prizes inside. And we're going to ask everybody to stay tuned for our next event, which is our 3rd annual Holiday Shop and Stroll on Thursday, December 10th. And we'll have more information on that coming up. And I know Judge Caruso and I normally get out and thank all the stores and merchants for joining us for that. So, Dan, we'll have... It's December 10th. Oh, got that?
Can't think without a pen. Thanks.
All right, moving along with our agenda. Next up, we have some a resignation from the Parks and Rec Commission. Patricia J. Dyer, a Democrat, 219 Toilsome Hill Road, term 11/11 to 11/16, and the resignation date was October 22nd, 2015, so we'll be looking to fill that vacancy coming up. Next up, some first selectman appointments, and this is for information only. As Emergency Management Director for the town of Fairfield, Fire Chief Dennis McCarthy, and the appointment date is October 1st, 2015. And next, Deputy Emergency Management Director, and that's Karen Dunn, Assistant Chief Karen Dunn, Deputy Chief Karen Dunn, sorry. And the appointment date was also October 1st, 2015. Next on our agenda, item 8, the Director of Community and Economic Development to hear a report on the Micro Enterprise Program. Mr. Barnhart, give us an update.
I'll be happy to do that.
Thank you.
I'll do this.
Thanks.
Thanks very much for giving me some time to talk about our Micro Enterprise Program. I won't talk about every particular slide, but I've provided some information for you to review at your leisure. This program is actually funded through a grant through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, our Community Development Block Grant, which we can allocate within our discretion to certain strategic priorities of the town, one of which being small business creation and economic development. The intent here is to increase employment opportunities for persons of low to moderate income. That meets the national objective with the federal government. The program provides technical assistance as well as startup capital to new or existing microenterprises in Fairfield, which is a defined term. A microenterprise is a business that employs 5 or fewer employees. This program is funded on a rolling basis, so we can entertain applications as they come in and review them with the help of a select committee of the Economic Development Commission, which reviews each application to determine whether or not it merits assistance. As I said, in terms of eligibility, it's any new or existing commercial enterprise, a for-profit business that employs less than 5 or fewer employees. It has to be located within the town or agreed to locate within the town, be current on all of its tax obligations, and demonstrate in some capacity that as a result of the assistance, it will provide employment for people of low to moderate income. Again, those are federal definitions in terms of what meets the definition of low to moderate income. The income limits are provided in your packet. We provide matching grants of up to $5,000. Typically, we're working with very small businesses. Their capital requirements are quite modest. So that $5,000 coupled with their $5,000 that they put in to leverage our assistance can be very impactful. Those funds can be used for a lot of different things, including interior renovations or tenant fit-up costs, purchase of equipment, and other business expenses, including marketing. It's really up to the individual business to indicate what their needs are and what would help make them successful. There are a few things statutorily that we're not allowed to provide assistance for. Those include things like refinancing or debt consolidation, lobbying expenses, and things of that nature. When we look at an application, we look at the strength of the business plan, we look at the experience of the business owner, and we look at the level of risk involved. Because a lot of these, again, are startups, we are accustomed to dealing with things that might be a little bit more risky than a commercial bank might otherwise lend or provide assistance toward, and that's fine. We do have a pretty good track record. I won't bore you with the application process, but we try to make that as simple as possible in terms of determining that they meet the criteria for participation, and then providing a quick and speedy turnaround in terms of an approval, or at least a finding as to whether or not they're eligible to proceed. To date, we have helped over 40 businesses, assisted to date since the inception of the program. It's been about 10 years. Most of these businesses average 2 full-time employees. They're quite small, as I indicated. 30% of them are new startups. The rest are existing businesses that are looking to grow or prosper here in town. Small percentage, 15%, actually relocated from another community of Fairfield as a result of the assistance being provided. And as I said before, while these are relatively, they might be perceived as relatively risky items, especially for new startups, we have a pretty good track record. 80% of those businesses were still in operation after 3 years. So that's, again, pretty good results for a program. And again, if there's anyone out there that's interested in learning more about the program, they can contact me at the Department of Economic Community Development, Mark Barnhart, 256-3120, or mbarnhart@fairfieldct.org. I'd be happy to entertain any questions you have.
Mark, thank you. Just to clarify, one, you've done 40 of these over the past 10 years, or roughly 4 per year.
Yep.
So kind of it's a good program from that standpoint. It's got to be a newer existing business with 5 or fewer employees.
Right.
It's got to be located in the town of Fairfield.
Correct.
And they've got to demonstrate the assistance will help them add jobs.
Yes.
All right, so if they meet those 3, they ought to give you a call.
Yes.
Very good. All right.
All
Any
right.
questions from my colleagues?
I have a comment. This is terrific. I mean, this is exactly what we need in Connecticut. We want to create jobs, especially in the town of Fairfield. So I applaud your efforts in this. My one question is for especially for the startups. I know sometimes it helps for them to have mentors or business people in the community or relationships with the universities in town. Have we been able to kind of incorporate that type of partnership with these grants or with this program?
Yes, that's one of the things we look to do, which is partner with other organizations that provide that one-on-one counseling, whether it be SCORE or the Small Business Development Center or Women's Business Development Center in Stamford. A number of organizations out there that provide the one-on-one counseling. We obviously do that as well, but we're somewhat limited in terms of the resources that we can bring to bear, so we try to partner with other organizations that have a little bit more robust resources in that capacity and can provide the technical assistance these businesses are looking for.
That's terrific. Thank you.
Just a quick question, and thank you for the update. The grants are up to $5,000. Do most of them reach the 5,000 level?
Yes, they do. Sometimes, some businesses will have one piece of very expensive. I remember there was a business that was looking to buy a kiln, and that was like over $10,000, so they did it in one fell swoop. Most instances, it's businesses that are buying, you know, a laptop computer or some particular fit-up expense, and they're sending in receipts a little bit at a time. So we're accustomed to doing both.
Oh, so you can do it both ways?
We can do it both ways.
You can.
And they have up to 6 months to expend the full grant, or that can be renewed for another 6 months.
Okay, good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And Mark, I think that this is one of the many kind of programs your department has under the heading of economic and development to kind of help grow businesses and jobs within the town of Fairfield. So,
Right.
and it sounds with 40 kind of organizations that have been helped over the years, and 80% of them still in town and functioning, it sounds like it's alive, well, and thriving and helping people add jobs. So
Yes.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, with that, I do want to take just a brief moment here of personal privilege. Meant to get this a bit earlier, but I got excited about our pet, Wednesday's pet, and I got excited about the prize drawing, and I wanted to get through those. I do want to point out to everybody, in case you missed it, we did have an election yesterday. And unfortunately, as part of that, my two colleagues will not be with us going forward. This is their last Board of Selectmen meeting. And I wanted to give them each a chance to say a few words back to the public based on their service to our community and this board. So, Mr. Kiley, would you like to start?
I will, thank you, sir. We had a meeting last week, and my fellow board members were very gracious, and they honored me for my service to the town for many years, and I want to thank you again for that. It was very meaningful for me to sit here and be honored by you, so thank you again for that. And speaking of honors, it has been an honor to be on this board for the last 3.5 years with Sheila and Mike and Kristen prior to that time. And it's been an honor to serve this town, a privilege for 22 years on various boards and commissions, and I have no regrets. I've loved every minute of public service. I would encourage anyone and everyone to do something along the lines of public service at some point during their lives. It's a great life experience. It's a great learning experience. You meet a lot of people, you make a lot of friends, and you learn a heck of a lot. So I want to thank the voters and the citizens of Fairfield for allowing me to do that. And I'd like to thank my family for allowing me to be away to serve the town. And I'd like to thank my colleagues on the board for working so graciously along with me for all these years.
Thank you. Ms. Marmion.
Well, last night I actually was talking about the role of cliches in my life, that I seem to be coming out with all of these silly expressions, and I have 3 kids, and when they leave in the morning, I say, go out and be the best kid ever, or I say, just do it, or, seize the opportunity, or, it's kind of silly, but last night I said that ultimately it's really not whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game, and I'm very pleased with how we played the game. I'm proud to have been a member here. I'm proud to have run with Mike. I'm so thrilled Mike was elected, frankly. I truly believe that when one door closes, another door opens, another cliche, and I'm really sorry to say that. But when I was asked to consider being on the Board of Selectmen, I thought, well, that's a little crazy, to be honest with you, but I'm so glad that I seized that opportunity because it's been so much fun. I've learned so much, and all I can say is that it's really been a pleasure serving with the two of you, and looking forward for the Board of Selectmen that comes on board. I honestly hope, my hope for them is that they are able to work together and build consensus and do what's best for this town. That is what I hope my legacy on this board, my short period of time, because that's what matters ultimately. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. When you look at Fairfield, I think one of the things that makes Fairfield special is all the people in it. As I look at my two colleagues, I realize that if it wasn't for elected office, I wouldn't have gotten to know either of you.
Right.
And I've had a chance to work with both of you over the years. It's been tremendously rewarding. Sheila, I think that every time we get a chance to talk, I learn something more about your background. We've joked about that over the years. And Kevin, the same thing here. We started out, I actually joined the Board of Finance, and you were, to some degree, my mentor at that. You kind of helped us get through that as chair of the Board of Finance and keeping things going. We've had a chance to work together now 2 different boards. I can't remember how many countless issues and resolutions and projects for this town. I think I will always be impressed with what you've done for our seniors, what you've done for our students, kind of at both ends of the spectrum, and how you've approached programs and projects in here.
Thank you.
I expect both of you will continue to be involved in our town because you definitely add value
Thank you.
wherever you go, and I want to thank you both for that on behalf
Thank you.
of the town. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you for that moment of personal privilege. And now back to our exciting agenda. What we have up next is the Fairfield Museum and History Center. And this is to hear, consider, and act upon a petition from Timothy Russell for the authority to remove, repair, and restore and reset 3 grave markers in the old burying ground. May I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All right, is Mr. Russell here? No, Your Honor.
I'm filling in for Tim Russell, who's the petitioner in the application before me. He's a professional comedian,
And
so he has a day job at the Russell Agency that he's got to fulfill there.
if I could, we all know you, if you could just stay.
Sure. I'm Dan Caruso, Judge of Probate for Fairfield.
Thank you.
And there's a petition which was brought by Mr. Russell on behalf of and as a member of the Fairfield Historical Society concerning the repair of certain grave markers in the old burying ground. To that end, because the probate court has to approve such removals and repairs to grave markers, and these have been damaged, both toppled and spray painted. So they're going to be removed temporarily over the winter with your permission, and the application is to come before me to grant that authority to remove them, clean them, repair the broken parts, and reset them where they belong. And that's our obligation to those who've gone before us. In that respect, I'm required to, and I do appoint guardians to represent the deceased in the grave and their families who continue to have an interest in them and in their very graves. To that end, I've appointed Dave Huntington and Betty Olderwald as persons who are uniquely positioned and have the integrity to represent those families in the way that we would want our own remains cared for, or those of our families. Mr. Huntington is going to be representing the members of Josiah Sturgis's family, and Mrs. Olderwald, those of David Ogden, and they will be, when we have our hearing, after this application from you to make these repairs, we will be having a hearing after notice in the paper, and they will make sure that everything is done right on behalf of the more than one person in the grave. There are children and other descendants in that these are marked by these stones. And finally, upon your approval, we are, or Mr. Russell has an appointment with Parks and Recreation Commission November 18th for their approval also. So I take it you all know Mrs. Olderwald and Mr. Huntington. Any questions? Any concerns?
I'll turn to my colleagues.
No, I mean, I'm very pleased to hear that you're undertaking this. I think it's very important work, and thank you for honoring, as you said, those who have come before us. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Kevin?
Thank you, Judge, and thank you to the volunteers for stepping up to take care of this important project.
All right. And I'm thrilled this is ongoing. I had a chance to visit when Melanie Marks and a group of volunteers and some of the folks from the FBRA, Fairfield Beach Residents Association, were repairing, improving, and cleaning up to a great degree the Beach Road Cemetery. And that was just a phenomenal undertaking, and the cemetery was a story and site worth visiting unto itself there because of all the history that was wrapped into that. And that was exciting to go through that.
We were reflecting earlier in the court on how we had the ceremony marking Samuel Smedley's
Yes.
gravestone,
Yep.
the repair, he being a privateer in the Revolution, he being the first collector of the customs appointed by President Washington, and how we had a wonderful ceremony in which you and I participated, and due to Hurricane Sandy coming on that evening, everybody was out battening down their hatches before we could get it done. But those are the kinds of things that make this cause us to remember and reflect on the heritage and how fortunate we are in this town. So I appreciate everything you do also.
Yeah. And it's another example of that we have the ongoing work and task of preserving our heritage for future generations. This is one big step in that, and I'm thrilled that this is ongoing. And also, as we learned, I guess, a couple of headstones back, that Parks and Rec has authority within our governmental framework for approving the work that takes place at the cemetery. So thank you for letting us know they're on the schedule also.
Thank you very much.
All right. Any further comments from the board? Any comments from the public? Seeing none, back to the board. We're ready to vote? All in favor? What?
Anybody moved and seconded it?
I thought did we not? Okay, well, let's do that. To hear, consider, and act upon a petition from Timothy Russell for authority to remove, repair, restore, and reset 3 grave markers at the old burying grounds. May I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Thank you, Jen, for catching that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Judge?
Thank you very much.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you soon.
Dave? Thank you. Next up, the H. Smith Richardson Clubhouse Building Committee charge. This was postponed from October 21st. To hear, consider, and approve a charge for the H. Smith Richardson Clubhouse Building Committee. May I have a motion to accept?
Motion to accept.
A second.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? With your permission, I do have an update for the board, if I can.
Okay.
Please.
All right, I've had a chance since we talked last to meet with Twig Holland, Purchasing Director, and talk about the idea of the town hiring an owner's rep that would represent us across multiple building committees.
Okay.
She said that's very doable. She reached out to some other communities, looked at it, got some knowledge and background from them, has put together an RFP of sorts for us to go out and do this. Again, that the dollars to fund this would be done from project to project, so it wouldn't increase our cost per se. It would give the building committees a leg up, because as they were formed for either town projects or school projects, the owner's rep would be functioning. We did discuss that in school building committees, the architect needs to be hired by the building committee. That's one of the state statute regulations. They have to go out and have an RFP and make that a competitive bidding process. The owner's rep is not under that charge or requirement, so we're able to do this. I think this gives us a chance to find a owner's rep that we're comfortable with, and find an owner's rep that gets experience with Fairfield, so we get to take knowledge, be it PCBs, be it any unique characteristics of how we do work, and carry that on, so as we form a new building committee, the new set of volunteers are not left on their own. We've been fortunate over time to have some very experienced volunteers that have helped us out, but I think this is a way going forward to improve the quality and support for our building committees and projects, and specifically in things like reporting, that type of thing, where this board is looking for updates. And as we've gone through some recently, I think there's the process to both provide some consistency and some improvement to the formats and the type of reporting on that. I guess 2 things. One, I think at some point it makes sense to put into the charge a clause about using the town-approved owner's rep firm in that. And second, that we get authorization for the town to proceed ahead with doing the RFP and getting that process underway. And that at a future Board of Selectmen meeting, we would approve that owner's rep firm. Does that sound okay? And any questions based on that?
No, it sounds good. As we discussed at our last meeting, I like the fact that we'll have consistency in both reporting and in information and in process, and being able to leverage the experience from one project to another, from one team to another, and having a point person that we can, rely on to be knowledgeable and to be consistent across town projects does make sense. And if we can do it within the building committee budget, like we're talking about, versus it being a hired employee, which is also the goal here, I think that's a win for the town.
I would agree. I mean, I think if we can standardize the way that we look at projects, it will make the board's jobs easier, it will make the building committee's jobs easier, and we may realize some real savings, not only in terms of key learnings, savings in terms of time and effort, in terms of not having a duplication of efforts, but also perhaps costs. So I think it's a terrific idea for the town.
All right. If that's the case, if I could look at the charge and add in here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right after the sixth paragraph, and before the final sentence on the page, the committee will consider the following as it evaluates. That I'd like to make a motion that we amend this with the following: the committee shall use the town-approved owner's rep firm on the management of this project.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion
I
on
just
that?
have a question in terms of timing. So how quickly do we think we can kind of put together the list?
I think we can, after talking with Twig, I think we can get this out, Twig being our purchasing director, I think we can get this out in the next 30 to 60 days and back, so that we can progress on with the staffing of the building committee. So it doesn't hold up the project, but it should be, we should have that in place just about the time that we've got the building committee approved, and they're ready to get started.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Sounds good.
All right. Any other comments, amendments, or discussion on the charge itself? We took this charge and from some other charges and modified it appropriately so that it includes all the relevant information that we've had in the past. Any further comments on the charge?
No.
I'm good.
All right. Okay to go to the public?
Sure.
Any comments from the public on the Smith-Richardson Clubhouse Building Committee charge? If you would, come up to the podium, please, and introduce yourself, even though you're well known to us here, Mr. Thompson.
Scott Thompson, here as a member of the Clean Energy Task Force, but I was also on the Riverfield School Building Committee. And not really familiar with this issue until attending the meeting tonight, but wanted to suggest one of the things we learned on the Riverfield Committee was using life cycle cost analysis in terms of developing building projects. We found a lot of good things to do in that project that will save the town money over time. And I wanted to encourage the consideration of either including that in building committee charges going forward, or as a component of the RFP for the owner's rep.
Yeah. If I might, I think we're using different terminology, but I think the charge is trying to get at the same point that you are.
Okay.
On page 2 at the top, it says how to minimize. It's under the heading of the committee shall consider the following as it evaluates and recommends project options: how to minimize the ongoing cost of maintenance and operation of the building and the improvements, how to incorporate appropriate green initiatives and capabilities within the design and operation.
That sounds fantastic.
So I think you use life cycle costing, but I think the terminology is different, but the concept is the same as to what we have in here.
Very good. That sounds great. Thank you.
All right. No, thank you for the comment. Any further comments from the public? All right, thank you. Back to the board. I guess two things. Let's take this in two steps. One, I think we need to approve the charge, if the board's acceptable to that. And then second,
The amendment?
no, the amendment's in here. I don't know if I don't think we need necessarily a motion to give me authorization to go out and do an RFP for this, since it's going to come back to this board for approval.
So a sense of the body to move forward?
I think so. So what I'd suggest is we take it in twofold. Step 1 is let's approve the charge.
Okay.
Step 2, and approving the charge will also let us start to advertise for members of the building committee. Step 2 would be, and I think a sense of the body motion is all we need, because it's going to come back here for final approval,
At some point.
probably for both the RFP, once we've got that done, and then for final approval of a selection.
Right.
Okay.
Did we vote on the amendment? Did I miss that?
Yeah,
Did we? We
did? We did not.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
So
I'm
that's-
sorry. We had it first and seconded.
We talked
All right.
about it, but we didn't.
Well, then
You didn't
let's
vote?
take that now.
I don't think so.
All right. We've
Okay.
got the motion to amend is before us. Any further discussion on the amendment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, now the charge as amended is before us.
Okay.
All right, any further discussion on the charge as amended?
No.
All right. Any comments from the public on the charge as amended? All right, thank you. Back to the board. Now we're ready to vote. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. And then may I have a sense of the body on getting an RFP out on an owner's rep form for the town to be used on future building projects?
I'll second that.
All right. Any further discussion on that? I get sense of the body, it's here. Any comments from the public on the sense of the body motion? Back to here. All in favor?
Aye.
So we'll, and Jen, if you'd please note this going forward, we'll get out notice on the forming the building committee itself. And Jen, if you could have an action item that, let me get back with our purchasing director to get a draft of the RFP out. All right? So that's done. All right. So that finishes item 10. Whoa. Item 11. And I guess we need to read at least one of these. To hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Director of Public Works. Whereas federal monies are available under the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Program administered by the State of Connecticut Department of Housing pursuant to Public Law 93-383 as amended, and whereas pursuant to Chapter 127C and Part 6 of Chapter 130 of Connecticut General Statutes, the Commissioner of Housing is authorized to disperse such federal monies to local municipalities, and whereas it is desirable and in the public interest that the town of Fairfield accept from the state a grant in a sum not to exceed $250,000 in order to undertake a Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Tranche 2 project, Riverside Drive Coastal Resiliency and Flood Mitigation Study, and to execute an assistance agreement, therefore, should one be offered. Now and therefore be it resolved that the town of Fairfield is cognizant of the conditions and prerequisites for state assistance imposed by Part 6 of Chapter 130 of the Connecticut General Statutes, and that the acceptance by the town of Fairfield of a disaster recovery community development block grant to be used for the Riverside Drive Coastal Resiliency and Flood Mitigation Study in amount not to exceed $250,000 is hereby approved, and further resolved that the first selectman is hereby authorized on behalf of the town to accept said grant, and further resolved that the first selectman is hereby authorized on behalf of the town of Fairfield to execute any and all necessary documents to secure said grant. May I have a motion to accept?
Motion to accept.
A second.
Second.
All right, the item is before us. Mr. Michelangelo or Mr. Carey, are you going to take us through
I'm
this?
going to fill in for Mr. Michelangelo quickly, but
Okay, if you please just take a moment
yep,
to
my name is
introduce-
Brian Carey. I'm the Conservation Director for the town of Fairfield. So just a quick background on this grant. I worked with Joe Michelangelo and Laura Pooley from the Engineering Department to put together a coastal resiliency grant looking at the Riverside Drive corridor, basically from Riverside Drive north to Post Road over to South Benson down to Jennings Beach. The intent of the study is to look at basically the resiliency of the area, that particular area, and what the town can do to improve mitigation measures to basically offset future impacts of not only global sea level rise, but also future storm events, such as we had during Hurricane Irene and Sandy. The town's been pretty fortunate to receive a lot of money through the CDBGR program, and this grant going forward is $250,000, and it's 100% reimbursable, so there's no cost to the town.
Okay. Just to clarify.
Yep.
What's before us is accepting the grant. There's no appropriation required from the town, and as you just pointed out, no local match. So
That's
we're
right.
basically approving the expenditure of $250,000, of which we will get 100% of that back.
That's correct.
All right, thank you. Any questions from the board?
Comment, I think it's terrific. I mean, it's all good for the town, so it's good news for us.
That's good news.
Mr. Kiley?
The one question I had that I didn't see here, when will the work be started and expected to be finished?
So that is, we won't get the contract until we go through this part. The next step would be to have the contract sent down from the state. The town attorney would likely review it, and then it would go to signature for the first selectman, at which time we could go out for RFQ. There's a little bit of a question about our actual procurement process. We do have consultants that are on retainer, basically. So we'll be working with the HUD, the State of Connecticut Department of Housing, to nail down exactly what the procurement process is. But this money's supposed to be spent quickly. I would say anywhere between 6 and 8 months we'd be looking at final completion of the project.
Okay.
And that's an aggressive time frame.
It is. So maybe next summer?
I would hope that would be. This money does need to be spent within a year.
It does.
That's kind of what they've alluded to us, yeah.
Okay.
And are there any challenges with that? Do you think you can get enough work done to spend the money within that time?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be aggressive, but absolutely.
Okay. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, I would just point out that coming out of Storm Sandy, one of my charges to Mr. Michelangelo was to look at what happened, what worked, what didn't, and how we can protect Fairfield better for future storms. We've seen a number of projects, both planning projects as well as some actual grants for doing real work for resiliency, most recently with the WPCA water treatment facility come through. And Joe, thank you for keeping this moving, and another piece of the puzzle, if you will, in terms of how to protect Fairfield from future storms.
Thank you.
All right. Any comments from the public?
Hi, I'm Dick Mahusky. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Flood and Erosion Control Board for the town. This, what's before you is equal to our measure number 1 in the total plan that we presented to this board back in January of this year. And if you look at the full application, it notes that, quote, approximately 3,500 households will directly benefit from this study plan, unquote. The full application further states that this study, quote, will focus on providing continuity between flood protection projects throughout the coastal area in the town of Fairfield. So this is all dovetailing in nicely as one, as you said, Mr. First Selectman, it is part of the overall puzzle, and we want to make sure that all the parts of the puzzle are dovetailed with one another nicely, and this will go a long way toward that. It's an impartial engineering study, so it's not Joe's personal idea or my personal idea or Rick Grauer's personal idea. It's a professional approach to this problem that the town has. And it will be coordinated with the entire plan, which is important. And most importantly, it will not require any town funds to accomplish this study. So for all those reasons, the Flood and Erosion Control Board, on behalf of them, I encourage you to approve this. Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, back to the board. Are we ready to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you. Next up, item 12. This is also from the Director of Public Works and requires the Board of Finance and RTM approval. To hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Director of Public Works. resolved that the first selectman is hereby authorized on behalf of the town of Fairfield to expend up to $250,000 to fund a community development block grant, CDBG-DR, Tranche 2 project entitled Riverside Drive Coastal Resiliency and Flood Mitigation Study. 100% of said project costs are reimbursed by the federally funded Disaster Recovery Community Development Block Grant. And that's it. May I have a motion to accept?
Motion to accept.
A second.
Second.
And Mr. Michelangelo, just to be clear, the first one is literally to apply for the grant. This one is to expend the money as part of that?
Correct. Sometimes we combine them, but on this one, we split it up into two separate resolutions, so it's
Okay.
clear.
So the first one, we basically have the authority of this board, which is only needed, which this board can do on its own, which is apply for the grant and apply for the money. But in order to spend said grant, if we should get it, we need authorization to spend the money, and that's what this piece takes forward, and that's why this piece will then go from here to the Board of Finance and also to the RTM.
Great.
All right. Any discussion by the board? All right. Any comments from the public? All right, back to the board. Are we ready to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Next up, and it looks like this one is also split into two parts. So we'll take item 13. From the Director of Public Works to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Director of Public Works. Whereas federal monies are available under the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Program administered by the State of Connecticut, the Department of Housing pursuant to Public Law 93-383 as amended, and whereas pursuant to Chapter 127C and Part 6 of Chapter 130 of the Connecticut General Statutes, the Commissioner of Housing is authorized to disperse such federal monies to local municipalities, and where it is desirable and in the public interest that the town of Fairfield accept from the state a grant in a sum not to exceed $100,000 in order to undertake a Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Tranche 2 project, Fairfield Engineered Beach Study, and to execute an assistance agreement, therefore, should one be offered. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the town of Fairfield is cognizant of the conditions and prerequisites for state assistance imposed by Part 6 of Chapter 130 of the Connecticut General Statutes, and that the acceptance of the town of Fairfield of its Disaster Recovery Community Development Block Grant shall be used for the Fairfield Engineered Beach Study in the amount not to exceed $100,000 is hereby approved. And further resolved that the First Selectman is hereby authorized on behalf of the town of Fairfield to accept said grant. And further resolved that the First Selectman is hereby authorized on behalf of the town of Fairfield to execute any and all necessary documents to secure said grant. May I have a motion to accept?
Motion to accept.
A second.
Second.
All right, any questions? And who's here? Brian, are you going to cover this again?
Yeah.
Any questions? I have one. Could you clarify
Yep.
what we mean by an engineered beach?
Yes, this is, so after Hurricane Sandy, one of the issues was, not just for the town of Fairfield, but surrounding areas, was that any damage created to the beach, to the actual beach itself, from erosion or sediment control, or just the scour from the waves, was not able to be reimbursed under the FEMA regulations because it did not meet what the definition of a FEMA engineered beach is. And there's very specific criteria, meaning that the beach at one time had to be surveyed and placed in a manner which met the regulations. If you see here, 9580.8. So what this study is going to do is going to look at the beach itself and possibly reconstruct it in a way that makes it more resilient to future storms. After that point, if we meet that criteria going forward, it requires annual surveying and maintenance that we would be doing in-house. If there was to be a catastrophic storm and the beach was to be completely wiped out, well, we would have the task, the town would have the task of restoring that beach back to its original condition. This would allow the town to seek reimbursement under that regulation, basically 75% that we weren't allowed to do in previous storms. This was not something that anyone in the state of Connecticut was able to get reimbursement under this regulation. So any damage that occurred to a beach during the storm that was happened did not meet this regulation. There was not one in the state that met this regulation. So going forward, this would give us the opportunity to seek that reimbursement, which would protect the town from substantial costs in the future.
No, thank you. One of the more
Yep.
frustrating things of Storm Sandy was when we went to FEMA and said we'd like money to kind of help repair our beaches and replenish the sand. They said, well, you don't have an engineered beach. We said, what does that mean? They said, well, it's one of the things where you kind of replenish and repair your beach every year, so you have all the appropriate documentation in terms of what was there and what wasn't. I said, and it was like, okay, because we don't use federal money every year to do this, you're not going to give us federal money once in the 70 years we need to do it?
That's right.
Just immensely frustrating in terms of trying to get money for this. So this is a step towards that to prepare us for future storms and put us in a position to make sure we get FEMA reimbursement for beach replenishment on this in future storms.
Going forward, that's correct.
All right, thank you. Any questions from the board?
No, I thank you for your efforts on Fairfield's behalf. I mean, this is a great step forward for us to protect us for the future.
Yeah, thank you to Joe and Laura for working together to pull this together.
Thank you.
Okay. Kevin, do you have anything? Or?
I'm good.
All right. Any comments from the public? Back to the board. Any further comments before we vote?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Moving on to item 14, which again is the authorization to spend the money. That was the authorization to get the grant. Item 14, also from the Director of Public Works, and this has to go on to the Board of Finance and the RTM for approval. To hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Director of Public Works, that the First Selectman is hereby authorized on behalf of the Town of Fairfield to expend up to $100,000 to fund a Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery CDBG-DR Tranche 2 project entitled Fairfield Engineered Beach Study. 100% of said project cost to be reimbursed by the federally funded Disaster Recovery Community Block Grant. May I have a motion to accept?
Motion to accept.
A second.
Second.
All right. Mr. Carey or Joe, are you here for any follow-up here? Any questions from the board?
No.
Good.
All right. Any comments from the public? All right, back to the board. Are we ready to vote?
Mhm.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. Joe, thank you. All right, next up, from the Penfield Building Committee, and this requires both Board of Finance and RTM approval, to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Penfield Building Committee. Resolved that the bond resolution entitled "A Resolution Amending and Restating a Resolution Adopted by the Representative Town Meeting on February 3rd, 2015, entitled A Resolution Appropriating $6,028,709 for costs associated with the repair and restoration of Penfield Pavilion, and authorized use of $1,750,000 of insurance proceeds to fund such appropriation, and the issuance of bonds to fund the portion of such appropriation not funded by the insurance proceeds, to increase the appropriation to $7,446,999, and bond authorization to $5,696,999 be and hereby is approved. May I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Mr. Bradley, can you take us through what we're up to?
Thank you. I'm Jim Bradley, Chair of the Penfield Building Committee, and here to present the proposal that backs up the resolution that you just discussed. I think it might be easier if I just read the presentation outline. I think it's already gone out in your packages. The project funding was approved based on preliminary drawings and a preliminary construction cost estimate that was prepared by the construction manager. As the design was finalized over the next 4 months, and that would have been February, March, April, and May. The project scope and estimated cost increased. The building committee and architect and construction manager took steps to reduce the cost of construction. The contingency was also under pressure at this particular time because we had a sufficient contingency, but we were starting to use it without even bidding the project out. The project went out to public bid, assuming several alternate ad options, and those are reductions in the project scope and cost to be added back at a later date. The alternate ad items were important but not necessarily critical to the program or performance of the project. The alternate ads would be added back to the project based on the availability of funding and contingency on a prioritized basis as the project progressed. The result of the public bidding phase significantly exceeded the original authorized amount. Actually, when the bids came in, the project was $1.2 million over budget. The major issues were general trades, which we all would refer to as carpentry, electrical, mechanical, and building moving. The electrical and the mechanical the prices for the electrical and mechanical portions were driven by the uncertainty of the electrical and mechanical issues with the damaged building, even though an effort was made to define those issues, define the damage and define the repairs. The general trades, we learned after the fact, the general trades and carpentry number, which was about $800,000 over, was driven primarily, and only one bidder at the time of public bidding, was driven primarily by labor shortages and the high demand on carpentry between Boston and New York, and backed up by different industry surveys like Engineering News Record talking about the shortage in carpentry. The building committee responded to the bid results in two ways. The construction manager and town purchasing were requested to clarify and rebid certain portions of the project, and the project architect was directed to develop preliminary design options that would reduce the project scope and cost. 5 cost-saving redesign options were provided to the committee by the project architect and structural engineer. The building committee elected to pursue a cost reduction redesign option that eliminated the lockers, the east wing, and added additional restrooms. The preliminary cost estimate, based on the information that we received during the bid phase, estimated that option at $6,330,262, exceeding the original funding authorization. As the building committee attempted to resolve the project cost issues, the members learned that the FEMA reimbursement criteria had been clarified. The clarification to the FEMA reimbursement criteria was the 50%, we complied with the 50% threshold rule, and the worksheet, the FEMA worksheet assumptions confirmed that the project cost would be reimbursed up to 75% of the project actual cost for the original project, both east and west wings. So in other words, we found ourselves in a situation 2 months ago where we were able to comply with the 50% rule as far as FEMA is concerned, and we would comply to a 75% reimbursement of actual cost. The reason I emphasized actual cost is that would cover the cost of the project. So if we exceeded the budget, FEMA would pay for those actual 75% of those actual costs. They have to be justified like any other government reimbursement program. So we went back to the original project as previously approved, which is the complete rebuilding of the facility. Based on the FEMA reimbursement clarifications, the building refocused on the original project that included the lockers, East Wing. On October 22nd, 2015, the building committee received and approved a guaranteed maximum price proposal from the construction manager. The project GMP forms the basis for the request for additional funds, and it's based on the confirmed and reconciled public bids and has been reviewed by purchasing authority and the town attorney. The building committee plans to proceed with the original project as previously approved by the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and RTM, and is recommending an increase in funding of $1,418,290. The project scope and cost and contingency increases are described in Exhibit B attached. What we've done here is we have highlighted the basic reasons for the difference, the delta between the approved funding amount and the bid, reconciled bid and new project budget. The variance was $1,418,290, which is what we've requested. 880, I'm going to round the numbers, 808, well, I won't round it, 838,189 was increased due to the bid results and the rebidding process. We had a lot of issues regarding the rebidding process because the low bidder for the carpentry on the second round of bidding was disqualified by the State Department of Administrative Services, which oversees the bidding regarding qualified bidders for public projects in Connecticut. There is an increase of $187,000 in project contingency. We felt after going through all this and again having a second look and going through all the bids and looking at the project almost in real time as far as bidding is concerned, that we needed to stick with a 10% contingency. So the contingency has, for the project contingency, which is in control of the, most of it is in control of the owner, some of it's in control of the construction manager, has been increased to $640,653. We have increased the budget by $95,168 because those options that we took out of the project, we've added back in, so that we are actually going to produce a complete project. So the alternates that the scope of work that we took out because we were under so much pressure to try to make the budget after the public bidding issues, we want to add back. We had an issue that came up during the bidding process, which was a final number for the town-required insurance, builder's risk insurance, for the project. And that was a $134,000 premium to buy insurance to insure the building while it's being repaired, reconstructed, moved, temporarily supported, and so forth. There's a $76,500 increase due to the required resubmission of proposals for the project oversight function, going back to your earlier discussion. We originally had proposals for project management oversight, and we went back out to the marketplace armed with the information that we were going to have a certain amount, or probably more than just a certain amount, of administrative responsibilities due to FEMA, and the record keeping that was going to be required, and the negotiations are going to be required with FEMA regarding costs. They're going to be strict about making sure that the project is a reconstruction, not a repair. And so we have to be particularly careful about how we manage our costs and identify our costs. The CM fee and general liability insurance and bond costs went up just because the project costs went up. That follows project cost. We did incur a cost of just under $15,000 from the architect and engineer when we went through the redesign schemes 1 through 6. And that was an effort to see if we could somehow bring the building in at the funded amount after we received the bids. And then finally there was $24,291 for pre-construction costs related to managing rebidding of certain bid packages, resolution of the trade bids and the qualified bidders, and an estimate for the west wing total replacement option, which is a FEMA requirement. So embedded in all this is 2.5 months of going back and forth with FEMA issues and making sure that this project was going to be compliant after all the time and effort that went into this, and then the late breaking news of FEMA reimbursement, or qualified reimbursement. The project qualified for FEMA reimbursement. All of that is now incorporated in this. So I'd be more than happy to answer questions. I know the agenda calls for Mr. Mayor to make comments, but I'm sure His comments would have been, I believe, that the project worksheet has been complete. Is that correct, Joe? And now is being negotiated or finally signed off on?
I'm going to ask, is Mr. Mayor going to be here?
He was supposed, yeah, I guess so.
Can I, Stan, could you take a look and see if you can get, yep, could you see if you
Yeah, he
could,
might be
let him
a
know it'd be good
better-
for him to show up now?
Yeah.
While we're waiting, can we question?
Please,
ask
go
a few
ahead.
questions? Mr. Bradley, thank you for being here. It's great to see you again. A couple of questions. On the builder's risk insurance, that 134 is just the increase in that line item?
Right. With the line item was originally carried at 36,000.
Okay.
The insurance is 170 and
Okay.
change.
And that basically, so that $170,000 of insurance just basically insures the building during the course of construction for damage or
Right.
things like that?
Right. And I'm not sure exactly of the timeline, but the basic problem has been to get the insurance company, the underwriter, to understand that we're actually moving the building, that the building will be actually transported from the site to the parking lot and then back, and during a certain period of time, it'll be up on blocks, cribbing, and that represents a significant risk to them.
Okay.
Ordinarily, this would be, 0.5% or 1%. It would be probably about between $30,000 and $50,000.
Right. That's a big change.
Yeah,
Yeah,
significant
right.
change.
Yeah. And the other question I had is if you could just talk, even in general terms, back about the trade bids. I know we only had one the first
Correct.
time around.
Correct.
And the second time around, there were more than one, but one was disqualified. Can you just talk through that process a little bit? And how
Right.
many came back the second time, and what your general feel is for how the bids came back and what the marketplace is like?
Right. The carpentry estimating, the line item that we had, and that the construction manager had in the budget was about $800,000 for the so-called carpentry trades. Let's just call it that, because it represents a lot of carpentry work for rebuilding a locker wing and porches, rails, ramps, and so forth. It's a fairly good-sized package. It has in it, embedded in it, the ability to salvage certain materials and reuse them. The carpentry package at that time did not include flooring and ceilings, but when it went out to rebid, it did. But those two numbers are not large numbers. So the first number that came in was $1.2 million, and so it was significantly over what was being carried by the construction manager. So the idea was to go back out to bid, and they did go back out to bid, and I believe, if Twig was here, she could back me up, I think the town received 5 or 6 bidders. They all were higher, at the same number or higher, with the exception of one, who was significantly lower. And so they tried to negotiate with that low bidder. However, that low bidder was disqualified because that low bidder was not qualified by DAS, Department of Administrative Services, for carpentry, for the specific construction line item of carpentry. They were a masonry contractor who had graduated into carpentry, had been doing it for 3 or 4 years, but they didn't have approval from DAS. So we weren't able to use them. And when you're not able to use them, you're just not able to. You can't go out and negotiate or anything like that.
Right.
So we went to the next bidder. And the next bidder is what caused the increase. So we have, when we went back out, or when the construction manager went back out for the bids, clearly proved that the problem was in general carpentry.
Okay.
And there's a lot of difficult work on this project that's related to carpentry.
And as you mentioned, the Boston-New York corridor has gotten very competitive.
Busy, and actually, without getting into too much detail or running the risk of getting into too much detail, there are fewer and fewer bidders that do general contracting that will actually interested in the so-called general carpentry or architectural trades. If you looked at Ludlow, may find the same situation, for example, in that particular project. So it's an industry problem, but also you could say the construction manager, as far as estimating is concerned, they could have had a higher, maybe should have had a higher number, but they're experts, they're good at it. We had estimates at schematic design development, and then about 80% of construction documents. So we did all of the due diligence to make sure that we had the right number. But we got, it's what the market says, and the market said that it was a lot more expensive than the construction manager said.
Okay. And my last question is, and thank you for that, the winner of that bid, of the 5 to 7 that came back the second
Right.
time, who was really the second lowest one,
Right.
was he the same one that bid the first time?
No.
No, it was a different
Yeah.
firm. Okay. All right, thank you. I'm good.
Sheila?
Just from a timing perspective with the winning bidders, are we assured that if this is a month, 2 months in the future, that we actually go forward, we're going into the winter months, that they'll be there for us
Yeah,
to work with us
Right.
so that we're not further delayed?
Right. What the construction manager did in collaboration with purchasing is go to each bidder and have them respond in writing that they were prepared to contract with the town or contract with the construction manager who contracts with the town and start the work in February. So that's what we're doing. And each one of the bidders has come back with a confirmation in writing saying that they've agreed to start the project, move the start date. So that's where we're on our way. We have the guaranteed maximum price that I referred to is part of the construction management contract between the town and Shawmut Design Construction. And that document is their guarantee of the price. It has certain conditions, exceptions, and exclusions in it, but they're not anything that they're normal. So we're ready to go. We're standing here now, or I'm standing here now, with a guaranteed maximum price based on public bidding, which is different than we were standing here before when we just had a schematic estimate. The project was approved on the basis of a schematic estimate. And the construction manager and the contractors went through the project before they bid it. And I'm sure they looked at certain things differently than the construction manager did. There's nothing like having the HVAC contractor, or 3 or 4 of them, who do show up for this bid, for a bid walk through and make their own assessment as to what equipment is damaged, what equipment has to be repaired or replaced. So in a repair project, it's like your car, taking it in and having supplemental damage. We at least we're standing here, not having spent any of the money yet, saying this is what the project's going to cost.
Thank you.
All right. And looking at this, you mentioned a couple of scope items. Can you just talk to us a little bit about how close is this project to what was approved in January?
The project that's represented by this presentation is the complete detailed project that was presented in January, and it's actually better than the one that was presented in January. I like to look at it as it's the project that the committee voted on it for final design. This project has landscaping in it, it has improvements of the parking in it, it has a corridor that goes between the east wing and the west wing to provide better access. It's a better project than exists today as far as the finished project, the convenience, and the performance of the project. And this number equals or is directly related to the construction documents that were approved by the committee in May or June.
Okay. If I were to say this project is identical to what was in January, how far off would I be?
It's identical to what was in January. It's better.
Okay.
I mean, it's not identical because there are some improvements. There's a little more deck space, there's a little more covered roof area over the snack bar area. There's some additions and modifications that were requested in our presentations to Parks and Rec. It's a better project,
Okay.
but it is identical as far as east wing, west wing, elevation.
So better in terms of what I'm going to call more detailed design and fleshing out of some of the detail appointments in it, not because it's functionally different or bigger or
Right.
larger.
Right.
So it's not a function of scope creep that's changing the pricing.
No.
It's a
No.
function of better definition of the original scope,
Right.
so we have better resolution and
Right. Correct.
And
But can I just, so you mentioned things like landscaping, so are those costs that would have, the town would have accrued after the building was
What-
rebuilt that we are now including? Because some people may
Right.
say, "Oh, we don't want to add that cost into this bonding
Right.
proposal." So explain to us why we should be looking at that. Why should we be bonding for that now versus, is that a necessity per se for us
Well,
to
the
move
prob-
forward?
the landscaping issue came up early in the project because the building is going to be 3.5 feet higher than the existing building. And it's going to have stepped retaining walls, or like terraced walls on the parking lot side in order to compensate for the new building height.
Right.
And there are more ramps, and there are ramps and rails that are more than what's there today, significantly more, for access, for handicap access. And so the idea was to have a minimal amount of landscaping to break up and reduce the impact of this large building facing the parking lot. So this isn't like trees and grass and so forth. This is supplemental landscape in close to the building that helps make the building more attractive in the neighborhood. And it was always in the project. It was taken out and left as an alternate ad during the early bidding, so that it could be added back at a later date, either from contingency or if the bids came in lower. The bids didn't come in lower. As a matter of fact, the bids came in so much higher that the contingency could have been wiped out. We would have been starting the project with well, we didn't have enough money anyway to start the project.
Besides something like landscaping, are there other costs embedded in this plan that could, just
Right.
want to raise the issue, could be taken
No.
away? There's nothing else
No,
other than...
when I mention betterment or a better project, it's just a question of, if you're rebuilding the locker wing, would you do it a better way? Would you use better materials on the flooring, which is a problem right now in that building? Would you, from the learning curve that Parks and Rec had, would you turn the toilet areas and shower areas around a different direction or make them closer or more accessible? Would you put a back door on the locker room so people didn't have to walk all the way around? Those are the kinds of things that the committee discussed. So and now, with the FEMA approval and with the FEMA worksheet, we have to be particularly careful that we do it on almost a one-for-one replacement. So we maximize reimbursement. No, I don't see any frills or anything extra on this project. We're still running a significant risk of rebuilding that particular building because it's been sitting there and it was badly damaged.
Right, so things like expanding the deck roof
Right.
or the overhang,
Right.
has that added cost, for
Not-
example? It's a nice to have, but...
No,
is
it's
it-
not. Well, I don't know whether it was a nice to have as much as it was, but just based on the use of that particular area of the pavilion, the suggestion was made a little more cover. And in the scheme of things, it's not a significant cost to do that. And that was probably the only place. There are other adjustments within the building, but it's essentially a replacement for what's there now. There's nothing, there's no bells and whistles have been added to the project.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. As we look at this, the request is really for $1.4 million and change to increase the authorization of spend, so we can go
Right.
ahead and build the project. If I could ask Mr. Mayor to kind of fill us in a little bit, what's the net cost to the town of that increase in expenditure, assuming these numbers hold?
Well, the net cost to the town...
If you could, you need to come to the mic first.
If you make all the assumptions that the building is essentially the same building, same design, function, capacity, et cetera, the net cost to the town would be 25% of the increased costs. So it'd be 25% of
1.4.
1.474 million. I don't have the calculators. That's like 375,000.
Okay.
Could we, Mr. Mayor was kind enough the other night on the phone to kind of walk me through some of the numbers. Could we revisit that conversation, because I think there were a couple lingering questions for me. Specifically, could we just do a little buildup of the project cost? I know it's roughly, we have a $500,000 insurance deductible, then there's the $1.75 million of the insurance, and then there's some grants, and then those get lopped off, and then of what's left, can you walk us through the calculation so that we can get to a net to the town when we're said and done?
Yeah, a couple of different scenarios, because there's a few things that aren't certain yet. But if you start with $7,447,000.
Yep.
If you deduct the 1.750 insurance recovery, deduct the $500,000 deductible piece.
That piece
that's
does
our
come out?
piece,
Okay,
comes
that was one of
out,
my questions.
Right. And then you add back the $1,000 FEMA credit toward the deductible. And then we have 2 community development block grants, one of which may be deductible. Neither of them may be deductible, but assuming one of them is deductible because it's related to specific FEMA-eligible work, you end up with a net of $4,898,000, and 75% of that is the FEMA reimbursement, which would be $3,673,500. Then you go back to the project cost of the 7,447, deduct the 3,673, deduct the 2 community development block grants, that gives you $3,249,000. Deduct the insurance recovery of 1,750, that would make it a net cost to the town of $1,499,000. 1,499.
1499. In that sorry, please.
Okay. If both community development block grants can be used for either non-eligible FEMA costs, like the landscaping you were just talking about, for example, or can otherwise be used for our 25% reimbursement piece, then that 1,499 number would be reduced to 1,274.
Okay. So we're in that zone between 1.275 and 1.5, roughly, based on those couple moving pieces.
Right, based on, and what we're doing right now, one of the activities that's taking place pretty aggressively is working with the state, working with our consultants to develop the alignment document that will then set up meetings with FEMA to explain to them, we think this is the same function, design, and capacity. And now there's something like, if they decide they don't want to pay for the extra decking or something, then they might not. But everybody's feeling very confident the way the product that we're producing, the way it's going to lay out, and how it'll be received by FEMA.
I mean, without speaking for FEMA, just common sense, when you look at the 2 projects, what was there and what's going to be there, it's hard to differentiate between the 2 at all. And it would be hard to make an argument that they aren't the same.
Yeah, I mean, there's a walkway, there's different bathrooms.
Yeah, there's nits and knots along the way, but it's not like it's 2/3 the size or 1.5 the size or different location.
I think Mr. Bradley and his committee and Mr. Michelangelo worked together to try to get a good product for that would satisfy those 3 specificities.
Good. And my last question is, and thank you for that, going back to that calculation we just did, which has us in a net cost to the town of the 1.275 to 1.5, that is inclusive of the $500,000 insurance deductible that we have to pay, or?
Yes.
So that's in there?
Yes.
All right, so including our $500,000 of deductible, we're in that zone of 1.275 to 1.5 net after all of this.
Correct.
Which is, if my memory serves me correct, and it's been a while, our original estimates, before we went back out to bid and got a project that was $1.4 million higher, but even after all of that, wasn't our original zone of what it might be somewhere between like 900,000 and 1.5 million? Didn't we have like a
Depending
range of
on-
what it
right.
could cost?
Depending on different assumptions, et
Based
cetera.
on different assumptions?
Correct.
So even though we're on the higher end of that zone, even after all of this time, and even after all of these bids that went back out and came back higher than we thought, we're still sort of kind of within that zone,
Right,
ballpark.
yeah. As long as the alignment fits into place, we're in good shape.
Okay. Thank you.
My memory had us in the same ballpark, so.
I thought so. Does that all make
Any-
sense? Does that?
Yes, it does, yes. I think that's not bad, not a bad, I mean, we've come full circle, pretty much.
It was worth taking the extra time to work with FEMA rather than going ahead
Well, I
a
think
year and a
that
half ago when
if you
we
look
had
at,
the earlier numbers.
if you look at risk management, I think that, one, as Mr. Bradley pointed out, we've got more definition and solid bids on the cost. So that gets us safer on the overall cost. And then if you look on the reimbursement side, with the additional work, the confirmation on the 50% rule, the additional kind of scope matching up you're doing right now, that's getting us a higher reliability on our reimbursement on this side. So in both cases, I see this as lowering the cost on the overall project cost and lowering the risk on the reimbursement side in both cases. So I think that you're absolutely right, we're in much better shape now than we were.
The original, excuse me, FEMA PW was for 1.9 million. Current one is for 6.5, but with the 50% rule, things over that, as long as the scope alignment, become eligible. So it's a minimum of $5 million difference to the good.
Do you happen to have a document that outlines the discussion you had on the phone with Mr. Kiley and kind of outline, I mean, that would be very useful, I think, to kind of break it down in that manner for people.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
When Mr. Kiley, you had the conversation on the phone and you just outlined for him kind of how we got to these numbers, the step-by-step numbers, that would be very useful
You mean
for
what I
us to
just
have.
said?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's easy.
That would be very
But it's-
helpful, I
yeah.
think, for people to understand where we were, where we've come in terms of the reimbursement and the costs, et cetera.
I'm sure the Board of Finance will appreciate that.
I'm sure they would appreciate that, so that would be great.
Good.
Yeah, and I think, again, the key here is one of the ongoing objectives was to make sure that we're not having to contribute any more tax dollars to this
Absolutely.
rebuilding and this project than is absolutely necessary, and I think that you've just confirmed that we're going through that, and we're roughly where we were, with a lot more certainty of the funding and a lot more certainty of the cost. So from my standpoint, that makes me feel much more secure in where we were. So thank you for your help in putting all that together.
And if I can just ask, in terms of timing, I mean, that's the big question. What does this mean in terms of building Penfield, rebuilding Penfield? If we started in February, give us a sense.
It's a 10-month project.
It's a 10-month project.
Yeah, so it will be, you'll see the building moving in the late spring, and you'll see it being probably moved back in the late summer, August or September, before hurricane season, onto its new foundation. It's going to be we've just spent actually on a good portion of one of the committee meetings about the logistics on site, the fencing, the protection, the issues of public crossing the street, so forth, coordinating with the police department regarding the crosswalks, where the gates are going to be, how the fence is going to be set up, so forth. So it's going to be a project that's going to run right through a very busy summer, I'm sure. So, but it's essentially a 10-month project, and there's no way we can accelerate it, frankly, because we're moving this building. This is going to be a step-by-step process. It's not anything you can kind of do in parallel.
Great, thank you.
All right. Any further questions from the board?
Just quickly, this has been a long process, and this is an extremely important project to our town, and it's taken a lot of effort from a lot of people to get where we are. So I want to thank Mr. Bradley and your entire committee for sticking with it, putting in all the hours and all the hard work and getting it done, and following through. I mean, you guys have done a great job, and I just want to personally thank you.
Okay.
And I want to thank Mr. Mayor, too. I think he just walked out. He has quickly become the FEMA expert in town, and he has spent a lot of time making this project work in various forms along the way. to get us to where we are, so that we're just about there, and we're still, kind of where we thought we'd be on the money. And we're going to have a beautiful building there in 10 months, plus whatever time it takes us to get off the ground. So it'll be worth having after that is done. So I want to thank him. And I want to thank Mr. Tetro, too. I know it's been a long process for you and your team, and everyone's worked hard in this building, various departments, Mr. Michelangelo and everyone else. So, thank you to you and your administration and your teams and your managers for working together and getting it done. I mean, it's going to be beautiful when it's done, and I'm happy to say that I'm going to be able to vote on this before I leave office tonight. I'm very happy to be able to vote on this and push this forward and get this building rebuilt. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your comments about the committee. It turns out to be a very, very good committee, 9 members, all have very strong opinions. and keeping them moving and keeping them going the right direction has been an interesting project in its own.
But I hope you're not going anywhere. I mean,
No,
we've still got to get this, you're still with us.
This is the easy part now, building the building.
I think they were I think everybody's very enthusiastic about doing it for the town and having it come out better than it was, and obviously more secure than it was when it comes to storms. And we tried to incorporate flood and erosion issues. Some of the cost that was an alternate was the riprap embankment on each side of the building and covering it with sand. We have to add fill under the building. There were some real questions about that. So it's better to go through this agony now than have a project that's out of control as far as cost is concerned. So I agree with First Selectman Tetro's comments about reducing risk. It's been a little painful, and I appreciate the fact that all the boards, everybody that's been working on this for the town, and the public in general has been patient with us. So we post everything, we're transparent, we have more information than anybody would ever want, and we have, I hope, public support to finish this project.
All right, well, let's find out a little bit
Thank
here.
you.
Any comments from the public? All right, wow, seeing none, back to the board. Any further comments from the board, or are we ready to vote?
Ready?
Ready? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Bradley, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good. All right. Next up, also from the Director of Public Works.
Oh, yeah.
This is going to require Planning and Zoning Commission approval also. To hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as requested by the Director of Public Works. Resolved that a solar power and services agreement between the town of Fairfield and Green Skies for the purpose of erecting a photovoltaic electric generation system over the westbound parking lot of the Fairfield Center Railroad Station for the sole benefit of Tomlinson Middle School located at 200 Unquow Road, the term of the agreement being 20 years, be and hereby is approved. May I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
All right, the item is before us. Mr. Lesser, could you
Thank you.
introduce yourself and
Stanton
step
Lesser,
us
Town
through?
Attorney. Good evening, all. I'm here along with Joseph Michelangelo, Director of Public Works. Joe Devanchik is seated in the room if he's needed. Ed Bowman, whose baby this is on vacation, so we're going to try to fill in, but he's the one with the guru on this. But I wanted to start by just giving you just a little history and a comparison of this project to the ones that you're familiar with. We've been here a number of times for these projects over the past couple of years, so I know you're familiar with them, but in all the projects we've been to you in the past, the town of Fairfield, these are solar power purchase agreements. The town contracts with a company to buy power from them at a certain rate. The company erects a solar generation facility on property that's owned by the town. So the town is contracting to buy the power. It's also the entity that is granting access to these companies to install their facilities. That's the way it's been in the past. And so when we come before you, you're both agreeing to buy the power and you're granting access. This one is a little different. This project is for the parking lot at the main train station, the large lot. And they propose to cover a good portion of that lot with these solar carports. and the power generated by these facilities will feed Tomlinson High School, middle school. So this project is a little different in that the town is going to contract with this company to buy the power, but it does not control the land. So it can't specifically grant access, although, as I'll mention in a couple minutes, they do have something to do with that. So in order to get access to the property, we had to go to the parking authority because they have a lease with the town, and they are the ones that currently control that lot. So you have to deal with them and get access granted by the parking authority. These projects are expensive. I mean, it's going to cost this company a lot of money to build, and it's going to cost the company a lot of money just to get it started, just to design it. Because this project feeds a building that is not located on this lot, it is going to have to go to zoning and get, I believe, a special exception. So like any other project in town, like any other developer or homeowner or builder, they're going to have to go to zoning and comply with all the zoning rules. But they were not going to spend the money, considerable money, you're probably talking minimum of $10,000 to develop the plans, the engineering drawings, the surveys that are necessary to go to zoning, and then go to the building department to get a permit, unless they knew that the town is on board with this. So we developed a process whereby we went first to the parking authority for approval of the access. Now we're coming here, and if it was approved by the parking authority, subject to conditions, which I will talk about. Now we're here, and if this body approves it, then they will, I believe there's some money that they can get somehow. Once this is approved, they know that they're going to be going forward, and they will then develop the project and take it to zoning for zoning approval. If it's approved in zoning, they'll then go to the building department, get their building permitted, and proceed. So at any of these three steps, really the project could die. If we didn't get access granted by the parking authority, that would be the end of it. If this body doesn't grant it, that will be, approve it, that will be the end of it. And if zoning doesn't approve it, again, they won't be able to go forward. So we did go before the parking authority, and they held a hearing on it, and I developed an access license agreement, which I think is in your backup. I think there's about 150 pages of backup tonight, so I don't know if you can find it. But there is an access agreement, and we had a hearing in front of the parking authority. They approved the access agreement with certain conditions. And as a matter of fact, they developed, in addition to the conditions we talked about at the meeting, they gave me another list of conditions that I have passed on to this company and said, look, you either agree to these or I can't tell you that access has been granted. So the parking authority developed a list of about 38 questions, which was forwarded to both to myself and to Ed Bowman and to this company, and they answered the questions, and then we held this hearing. So as it stands now, there's a conditional approval by the parking authority for this, and we're before you now for approval of what's titled the Solar Power and Services Agreement. And that's the document that serves two purposes, as far as I'm concerned. Number one, it's the agreement by which the town is going to buy the power. It sets the rates, it sets the conditions. In that respect, it's similar to all the ones that you've seen before. It also contains an access, a granting of access, and I feel that that's necessary because if you approve this agreement, then you're essentially giving consent to the parking authority for them to grant access. Now you have access granted by both bodies, which I think is necessary under the lease. And that's basically where we are. I don't recall if Mr. Bowman has ever been before you with this one, with the numbers. No. I think that there is the 14 points, or whatever they call it, the 14 points, which talks about the savings, and perhaps, I don't know, can you talk to that? Okay. So if there are no questions of me right now, I turn it over to Mr. Michelangelo, who could, and then I'll come back.
I have a question. Do you have the list of the questions that you submitted to the
list of
solar
conditions?
company, the
I
list
think
of
that
conditions?
I think it might be in your backup. It says additions to access license agreement. There are 13.
Oh, there it is, yes. It's this one, right here.
Gotcha.
So I forwarded that to the company. I said, look, we're going to have to include these in the access agreement, or at least, the substance of them. And quite frankly, I haven't heard back from them, so I don't know whether they've agreed.
So the condition number 2, part of it says no more than 25% of the parking lot will be unusable by commuters at any given time. This is during the construction?
Yes.
Putting up, okay. And what period of time would that be?
We put in the agreement that the project will have to be done commencing the day after Memorial Day and ending the day before Labor Day. At least the facilities will be constructed then. They may be allowed to wire or something like that. It's not going to interfere with the use of the parking lot. But all the trenching, if necessary, anything like that's got to be completed by then.
And the alternate, that 25% of the parking that will go away during the summer, how are we?
That's going to move around, and based on a request of the parking authority, what I put in here was that they're going to start with the area closest to the station and move away. So, because that's the beginning of the summer is when they'll have the least use. That's why it's being done in the summer. And they don't want, if something happens and they're still working by the station at the end of this, when the people start coming back, that's not good. They may block access to when it's more crowded.
So talk a little bit more about those alternate parking areas will move around. Talk to me about that.
Well, they're going to be blocking off 25% of the big lot. So they're going to have to find, and I believe that it was discussed at the parking authority meeting, that there's other options, hopefully, and perhaps, the parking authority would be better to answer this, but we talked about possibly using Tomlinson. The Fairpreen lot is there, and possibly using, as we have in the past, Ludlow and shuttling people down. But, you're talking about roughly 200 spaces at a time, at a time when the parking lot is, utilized, from what I understand, less than it is in the winter. If people are away, they don't use it as much. So that's why they're doing it that way.
I guess I would ask that the parking authority give us a use of the current use, the summer use, et cetera, like what percentage of that lot is not being used, so we can get a better sense of what is this 25% really going to translate into for commuters and for people coming in, because if we don't have that information, it's hard, you know what I mean? We can't just say, oh, part of the lot is not used. I think we need some hard numbers in terms of usage.
I just want to remind you that this body doesn't control the use of the parking lot. It's the parking
But
authority, and
making
they've approved this.
decisions about giving up 25% of those parking spaces is,
Oh, excuse me. We're talking up here. Public comment will be later, please.
I do think it should
Right.
inform our decision.
Okay, yeah. I mean, as you know, the parking authority itself has approved this, so.
Can I ask,
Go ahead.
I know they've approved it, but they've approved it conditionally, correct?
Yes.
Now, is this list of additions, is this synonymous with the list of conditions? They are the same items? Is that,
These were their conditions.
these
yes.
are, it's called additions, but these are the conditions? Is that?
Yes, these are,
Is that
well,
what-
there were a couple extra that I actually had time to incorporate into the
Okay.
agreement, which I did
Okay.
when I forwarded it to council, but
Okay.
these came afterwards, and I then forwarded them on, so I'm waiting to hear back.
All right, so there's 13 of these additions or conditions.
Yep.
So I guess my first question would be, is this the exhaustive list from the parking authority? And my second question would be, I think you already answered it. Have they been agreed to by the
I have
The solar
not-
company.
I have not heard back.
Okay.
I mean, some of them may not be
Oh,
feasible, quite frankly,
I didn't,
but some of these are answered because
thank you. I didn't see that.
there was a concern about the phasing of the construction,
Okay.
and I was informed by Mr. Devanchuk that when they go to zoning, they're going to have to present a phasing plan to zoning. And don't forget that this is going to go to TPZ like any other project in town. There'll be, a public hearing on this, there'll be notice, so that has to take place also. And they have to pass it, and theoretically, people could appeal from that, if it's granted. You can take an appeal. So there's a ways to go here.
Thank you.
Just to talk about that process for a minute, and you and I have had a couple of conversations on
Oh,
this. One of the questions is, how and when does this get presented to the neighboring community in Mosswood? And you've pointed out here that there has to be some sort of drawings or sketches, because there's nothing here that really lays this out in the detail that we might like to see. You have to have that for the planning and zoning meeting.
Yes.
So, as kind of following the lines of our discussion earlier, it was, you're asking that the Board of Selectmen approve this
Yes.
to give the developers some comfort and security that they will then spend the money to develop the drawings for the Planning and Zoning Commission. At what point do those get presented to the neighborhood?
I think that they would get presented in the way that any developer that's seeking to develop a project would do it. Typically, they'll meet with the neighbors beforehand, before they go into zoning. I'm not speaking for them, but that's what's been done with any significant project, that, a developer is not going to go in cold.
Yeah. Can this board put, the two things that seem to be outstanding, one is more detailed drawings so that the neighborhood can see this and see what the impact is and see exactly where it is. And then second is more details on the parking staging. I had the opportunity recently to, with a number of other folks to visit with commuters early in the morning, and this question came up quite a bit in terms of what's happening to the parking, what they'll do, and some genuine concern there. So I think in order to answer that concern, we'd like to see that phased approach that Ms. Marmy mentioned, but also, I think, some better agreements. Because I've heard, and I thought this was in a little bit more detail or substance, but I'm hearing that these are thoughts as opposed to things that are locked down. Both additional parking at Roger Ludlow Middle School with some type of shuttle process. I've heard about using spaces at Tomlinson Middle School because it's right there. We know we've got about 100 spaces at the Fairpreen lot that are not used on a regular basis, and certainly not in the summer. And then I'd also heard that there'd been a negotiation with Fairfield Metro Center to allow use of our parking passes over there, kind of a mutual agreement, so that folks could park there, catch those trains, which I fortunately had a chance to see that they run about the same time that the Fairfield trains do too, recently. So 4 different options, and I don't mean to put you on the spot because you're not the parking authority, but any feedback as to where the parking authority sits, or
I think that
okay,
Mary
I'm sorry.
Kay Frost, who's the chairman of the parking
Mary
authority,
Kay,
has
if
been
you
very
could,
proactive in
if you
that.
could join us and fill us in on your thoughts and kind of update us on the status, that would be great.
That is a picture. I don't know if you saw that in the back.
No, I didn't.
Did you see that, Kevin? That is, we referenced not having a picture, but that's kind of the back page of what it looks like.
So first, I'd like to say that when we passed this conditionally, we didn't have a full access license agreement. Stan said he hadn't had a chance to finish it. So that was part of the conditional piece. And this is first time I downloaded it, printed a couple of pages off. It's the first time I saw it. We have never, Parking Authority has never done a count, Sheila, to your question, in the summertime. I go through the lot almost every day. Today it was absolutely full. As I went through, the very last space got taken. And there were about maybe 25% of the Fairpreen lot was also taken. But in the summertime, that's never the case. And because we do counts every week during the regular part of the year to see whether we should go to our wait list, but because you can't really get a good count in the summertime because people are on vacation, the Parking Authority has never done a count in the summer. So it's very hard to say. I will say that this August, when I went through, after we had added to the wait list quite a bit, there were days when it was 7/8 full. A lot more than it used to be in the olden days, particularly because Mr. Tetro keeps on telling us, we should go to the wait list, we should go to the wait list. So
if I could just phrase the question, perhaps. One is, there's roughly 1,100 parking spaces?
Well, some of it is probably about 800 on that side, but
So 800 on that side.
Yeah.
25% of 800 is about 200.
Yeah.
So just, you're talking about whether the space is filled or not. Let's just talk about the spaces themselves, whether they're full or
Okay.
not.
So in
Since
the-
we're going to, 25% of 800 is 200.
200.
So we're looking for 200 spaces.
Right, 200 spaces.
We've got 4 different options here.
We were gonna-
Where are our discussions, or what's the update on the alternative parking or options for those 200 spaces?
Okay. We were thinking about doing it in Tomlinson. Tomlinson has 117 spaces, 10 of which were going to get used, or were not going to be available to us because there's 12-month staff. But then in our questions, the answer to our question about staging, the vendor said that they plan to use the Tomlinson lot for staging with materials and all that type of thing, which kind of knocked Tomlinson out of the picture. Went to Dr. Title. It looks like we'll be able to use the front part of Roger Ludlow Middle School. There's 126 spaces there, plus the probably half of Fairpreen lot, maybe more, which would be 55. And then for the rest of it, you figure people are going to be on vacation. So I think probably for the 2 months that school is out, we're in pretty decent shape. However, school doesn't get out till June 20th. It's done, people are back by about the middle of August. We have a good 3 weeks in the beginning of June. We don't really have a back place where we know where we can put them for sure. Cindy did contact Craig Bordier at Connecticut DOT. He said they would be amenable to considering letting our permit people park there for that period of time, depending on utilization. And their utilization at the moment is 1,300 out of 1,400, so that would give 100 spaces there. We might be able to talk some people into going down and using the Trinity lot in Southport, which tends not to be totally used, if people are willing to do that. That would be another spot that perhaps they could go to. But my concern really is those, those first 3 weeks and then the weeks after. And we say it's going to end by September 2nd, but if they run into any kind of construction problems or whatever, who knows how long it could go. That's, Mr. Tetro talked about risk. There's, in that piece of it, there's risk, in terms of not being able to, for people to find a place to park. And in those 3 weeks before and at the end, you're not going to have so many people on vacation because school's not out. So,
So what were
so
those
it's a question.
dates of construction that have been agreed to?
Supposedly, they're going to start June 1st. They're supposed to end by September 2nd. And they have to do some staging beforehand, so probably there would be a week before that they have to, get the materials out. The very first presentation that Green Skies made, they were taking parking spaces in the back that were, actually, one month they're saying that they're not going to use any additional parking spaces, but then they showed that they were staging there, and we said, you can't stage there. So,
Okay,
so
you
then they
solved
said
that
they were
piece.
going to Tomlinson, but when I talked to Phil Dwyer the other day, he said, nobody's asked Tomlinson for, the Board of Ed for permission, and they would have to do that. So I'm not exactly sure what, where any of that stands.
Yeah, Mr. Dwyer definitely said you have to talk to the superintendent's office,
Yeah.
not the Board of Ed itself,
Yeah.
for any operational issues
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah.
So do we know when we'll have that conversation with the Board of Ed superintendent's office?
That would be for that piece. I mean, I've had my discussion with the superintendent's office about trying to find a place for our people to park, but it's up to Mr. Bowman, I think, to talk to the superintendent's office about the whole staging and all that stuff, because he's the one that talks to Green Skies. It's not the parking authority.
So you just identified 276 potential spaces for alternative parking, plus Trinity. Is that correct?
Plus, Trinity's going to be, most of Trinity is available at any point if anybody's
Okay,
willing
when
to
we said
go
that's
there.
100 spaces, 200 spaces, 300 spaces. How much is at Trinity?
I'm not sure what the Trinity lot is. All I know is we never seem able to fill it up, and we're paying
It
for it.
looks vacant every time I'm
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
But I just
yeah.
want to point out
Yeah.
that the issue, because we were recently at the train station, I was one of those people.
Yep.
And in Southport, the trains don't run on the express
Oh, I'm
line, so
well
it's
aware.
not as convenient to the
I know.
commuters. Because I asked the same question, why aren't people going to Southport? This is
No.
great. And it's just not as
Yeah.
convenient, so that's part of your challenge.
That's why we don't charge as much for parking at Southport as we do for Fairfield.
Right.
So just getting back to the question.
Yep.
You identified 276.
But not always at the same time, right? I mean, we're talking about, there's more, in that two-month period, there's more opportunity, because people could go to Fairfield Metro, they could go to Roger Ludlow, they could go to Fairpreen, they could go to the other, but the problem is, as I say, those weeks that they're going to be doing construction or preparing for construction, but there isn't any, but the schools are not available. And then we only have the option of part of Fairpreen, so maybe 70 spaces at Fairpreen, maybe 100 spaces at Fairfield Metro if their utilization hasn't gone up. And then, that's, and then the Trinity lot.
Okay, so that's,
So that gets kind of close.
mhm.
But it doesn't make, commuters happy to think that they have to be schlepping around trying to figure where are they going to find a space either.
Who has responsibility for sorting out the alternative parking plan? Because you just listed 5 different options that have been thought about and discussed to some degree. Who's taking responsibility for sorting this out, so we'll know exactly how many spaces are available, which weeks, and folks will know what to do?
I'm working on it. As I say, well, Cindy's working on it. I think Cindy is interacting with Connecticut DOT, and I've been talking to Dr. Title. And the Trinity lot, we have control over, and, that is available. Fairpreen as well. Any unused would be there.
To boost the train schedule, available parking, any thought of using a shuttle from Trinity back to the downtown lot?
No.
Did we talk about using a shuttle from Ludlow Middle School to the downtown lot?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I've thought certainly, I think we would have to do that.
Okay, and
And it would just go round and
we consider a
round.
shuttle from Trinity? Would that work at all, or why not? What are your thoughts?
I think the way traffic is, it could take 15, 20 minutes to get from the Trinity lot up to Fairfield Center. I mean, we offer people often a chance to go to Southport, which is really the Trinity lot, before, while they're still on a wait list for Fairfield, and most people won't do it. I mean, it's you might as well drive to Stamford, practically.
Yeah, different
really
issue
doesn't
when
work.
you're, yeah, okay.
It's a shame the Exide property isn't available for us to park on top of while this is going on. That would be perfect. Then we could just shuttle back and forth from there, and I'm sure there'd be enough space.
I think there's a little bit of sediment that's stored on the Exide property right
Yeah,
now.
I know. I know.
So what's the timing for sorting this out?
Well, I think, as I say, for the 2-month period, I think we're in decent shape. I'm not worried about that. Ludlow will work, Fairpreen will work, Southport's available. And I could go back to Cindy and try and find out, but Craig's response was, well, let's discuss it as we get closer.
Okay, so the dates you're concerned about are the month of June or the first 3 weeks in June?
Until school is closed.
Okay, and that's roughly the 25th
And so that's about the
22nd?
20th. Well,
20th?
that was more or less what Dr. Title said. I think they're scheduled to end on the 17th, I think.
Okay, so it's,
he
let's
said.
say June 1
So
through
he
June
was
20.
saying- Yep.
And then on the back
like
end.
August 15 until they close. Now supposedly they're supposed to close on September 2nd. September 23rd, I believe, is the date that they turn on the power or whatever. There's something in the contract there about September 23rd. I didn't quite understand what it was, but it's something about where UI comes out and checks and, so But as I say, it's supposed to be done September 2nd, but if they run into a problem and it gets delayed,
Yeah.
you know.
So I think we need a
that's longer.
contingency in addition to kind of nailing down this part of it. What do we
Yes.
do if we,
I
in the
don't
beginning of June, when kids are still in session and they can't use Tomlinson as the staging and except, or for parking, and then what do we do if it goes into, September, October? I mean, so we need to look at contingency parking as well, right?
Yeah, I was just trying to get the dates down so we
Right.
kind of have some framework
Yes.
for where.
I don't know. I
Just
mean-
trying to define the issue so we have a chance of coming up with a solution, that's all.
And those are that's the timing, the 3 weeks before June 20th, and then from the middle of August until the completion, which hopefully is on time. Hopefully they don't run into problems. But, I mean, I think this is one of the reasons why the board was so concerned about even approving it. I mean, we wanted to save 150 to 180,000 for Tomlinson and, be good citizens of the town, but to be perfectly honest, as a commuter for 16 years out of that train station, I have very mixed feelings about the cost benefit, certainly for commuters.
Well, the issue is saving $180,000 a year for a whole
I know.
lot of years.
I
increasing
know.
number. That certainly has
I
a certain
realize that.
tax.
But I also, having been a commuter and knowing what it's like to get to that station, 3 minutes before, and the uncertainty that commuters are going to face for that period of time, and knowing that I have racked my brain and I've asked several people, in town who might know whether they can think of any place where people could park for those 3 weeks in the
Well, let's-
beginning and at the
yep.
end.
I
Can't
think
get it.
that's a healthy exercise, but we're just trying to get a report at this meeting in terms of what you're doing. You said you had concerns. You voted for this, right? It was a 5-0 vote on the commission, right?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. There were also some questions on snow plowing and paving. Did those get resolved at the parking authority meeting?
Well, I think at the very beginning, when Scott came to the meeting, he said we had to have a minimum 14 feet so that the snowplows could go under, and I believe that shows on the plans. Is that correct?
So we have sign off from Public Works that they can plow the snow in the parking lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
How about paving? I think one of the things, when you and I were talking, you talked
Yeah.
about that
Yeah,
at some point we need to pave the parking lot. Are there any issues with paving?
I would presume that the board believed that they had agreed to pave the lot.
Okay, just help.
But I gather not.
Okay, when you say they,
So-
could you tell me who they is?
That the vendor, Green Skies. But in the list of questions, they said no, they had not agreed to pave the lot. I would presume that they will have to restore it, so, back to the condition it was in, or it's in now. Well, hopefully a little better than that, but the kind of paving that we thought was going to be done is not in their plan.
Okay, so we're clear from the agreement that there's no paving.
Yeah.
But when you and I talked, the question was, irrespective of who did it, if the parking lot needed to be paving at some point in the future, that would happen. It could be done with the solar panels in place.
I think that was a question that Elise had put forward
I
about
think I remember that.
the...
That's why I'm asking if
Yeah,
you got your...
about the height of the equipment, and whether the equipment would be too tall to fit under there, and
Yeah, that's why
maybe Joe
I'm
can
trying
answer
to
that.
ask if that question
Well, let's turn
got
it to Joe,
answered.
because I don't know the answer.
What I'm trying to get to is, was that question answered for the parking authority at your meeting?
No.
And you voted, and that wasn't, was that one of the conditions, or?
No.
I don't think so. I
No.
didn't see it.
Well, those conditions were a result of going through the 38 questions, taking their answers,
Yeah, let's just
and
stay
putting
on,
it
if
in
we
there.
could just stay on paving at the moment?
Yeah.
Just trying to figure out where we are?
No, we did not.
Elise, did you want to, you just need to come up here, introduce yourself, and please help.
My name's Elise McKay. I'm a board member on the Parking Authority. The answer we got about paving and snow plowing was that we were given verbal assurances by Joe and that the equipment would fit underneath this 14-foot structure, steel structure. So we were given only verbal assurances to that effect, and, I don't know whether our equipment is 14-foot. If we ever hired another company, I don't know whether...
Joe, are we okay with that? What's that?
Yes, we're okay to pave on it. So when you're paving any road or any street, the problem is when the truck body's in the upright position and you're constantly lowering it when you go through an underpass or trees or utility wires, so you're always going up and down. So once you go up and the paver box is filled, you could lower it and you could go 100 feet without having to raise it again. So these are something we could work around, just like trees when we pave in Greenfield Hills.
That's the milling equipment, correct?
No, that's the worst. The worst part. The worst part is the actual dump truck with the truck body in the upright position. That's where the truck body approaches 20 feet, and we have obstacles on every single road that we face with utility wires and trees, and you're always lowering it. So these don't represent any more challenge than any of our other roads with the height conflicts.
Okay. All right, can we get that, because I thought that was one of your questions that you'd asked a while back. Can we just get that answer back to their board, so their entire board's clear on that the paving is not an obstacle? And it's no problem.
Yeah, because it was
There was another issue that the parking authorities very concerned about, is that we do not lose any spaces as a result of this construction. And I have some concerns because we've been told that, originally we were told that the concrete or the steel beams, the columns that were going to go into the pavement were going to be located at the intersections of parking spaces, so in the corners, and that they would be no larger in diameter than what's existing there. That was the original. Now we've been told the bases are going to be 30 to 36 inches. I don't know, square or diameter, I don't know if they're round, but that each space is 18 feet long. That's the zoning reg requires it, but the zoning regs also state that you can't have anything obstructing the parking space. And if it's 36, we've got 1.5 feet on either side, and so I'm concerned that we're going to lose spots.
Yeah, but that's a zoning.
Mr. Devanshi can answer that question.
Okay.
I mean, that will be a zoning thing, but
Yeah, I mean-
I don't want to lose spots as a parking authority to the columns that are going to be placed.
Okay. Again, did you ask that question at the presentation?
Yes, and we were given assurances that it wouldn't be a problem, but
Okay.
I'm raising this because I see it, I don't see how it could not be a problem if that's actually the dimensions.
But that would be something that certainly zoning would take up if it's a problem.
Yes.
Do you have that in one of your conditions, that no parking spaces are lost?
Yes, so that should be, and I have not had an opportunity to see this access license agreement that has been revised by Mr. Stanley.
Right, but what I'm asking about is the conditions that you identified as part of your resolution.
Yes, no parking.
So part of your resolution of approval says that no parking spaces will be lost.
Yes, and that
So
must
if-
be included in that.
So if perchance they are, that voids the resolution. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay, so you've covered the parking authority's desire to have no loss of spaces by putting that as a condition of approval in your agreement.
Yes, again, I haven't seen whether it's in the license agreement, the
Well,
revised
there
one.
are two things. All it has to be is in your resolution.
Well, we haven't
because-
actually had a resolution. We made a motion to approve.
Okay. How'd you do that without a resolution?
Well, we just made a motion to approve it, subject to approve the access license agreement.
So there's no resolution that said
No
what you
formal
approved or what you
resolution.
didn't? How did you vote?
We voted 5-0 motion.
No, how did you
Oh.
vote on something that doesn't exist?
We voted on on a motion.
Maybe I can answer the question.
If you
Right,
could,
please, because the resolution went away.
So we passed out the access agreement at the meeting, and the resolution was to approve the access agreement with certain conditions. I asked the parking authority during the meeting, I said, what would you like me to add to the access agreement? I was given about 4 things to add. I can tell you what they were because I added them already. And I also, there were some concerns that there might be more conditions. So I said, well, I'll add the conditions that you've given me tonight, and I'll forward those to the attorney. And then when you forward me your list of conditions, and Mary Kay said she could have it to me the next day, which she did, And I forwarded that on to, and I indicated to the company that they were going to have to agree to these things also, and that I would then modify the agreement. So what I added into this agreement was, number one, licensee covenants that there will be no loss of parking spaces as a result of the installation of the system. Two, licensee will provide an LED lighting system to be installed under the solar panels. That was a condition. Three, licensee covenants that it shall use commercially reasonable efforts to construct the system during the period commencing the day after Memorial Day and ending the day before Labor Day. Licensee shall use its best efforts to block the fewest parking spaces possible and shall comply with directives of the Fairfield Police Department regarding traffic flow, etc. If required by the Fairfield Police Department, licensee shall employ police officers to direct traffic during construction. Construction of the system. The system shall be constructed in phases with no more than 25% of the available parking spaces unusable at any time. Construction shall commence in the area closest to the station building and shall end in the area furthest from the building. Construction shall be scheduled so that all of the solar carports, together with trenching and other site disturbance, is completed prior to Labor Day. In the event that it is determined that the schedule will not be able to be met, licensee shall perform work on weekends if required to meet said schedule. And then last, at all times prior to the system and the lighting to be installed by licensee becoming operational, licensee shall provide at licensee's cost temporary lighting at a level which existed in the parking lot prior to commencement of construction. These were, for the most part, items that were relayed to me at the meeting, and I said I would include them in the agreement. We obviously got that other list. I got it the next day, and I forwarded it on. But, so a lot of the, so they voted to approve this agreement, subject to any other conditions that they were going to give me. And so that's what was approved at the
This
meeting.
document called Additions to Access License Agreement. Who wrote this up?
That's
I believe
our-
Mary Kay.
That's
you
what
wrote
I,
this up.
yes, that's what I
So-
took out of the
Elise?
questions.
Yep. Elise, just to answer, item 6 on this says there will be no reduction in parking spaces once the carports have been. Did you have a chance to review that before?
I haven't seen this agreement at
No,
all.
I'm
and
talking
that
about
list of
your
questions?
list of questions.
Yeah.
So that's where this is. Your resolution that you passed is subject to these.
Yeah.
Right.
this
That was the first thing that I
Candace.
included anyway.
Yeah.
So just,
Yeah.
guys, just one thing, I'm just trying to clarify one
I
thing at a
understand.
time. The question was, are we going to lose any parking spaces? Your resolution references this document that you wrote that says there'll be no parking spaces lost. Are you guys comfortable with that?
Yes, sure.
Is this, does it go in as an exhibit?
Yeah,
Or how does this
is
go
it in the
in?
body and has
No, what I,
these guys
what I
agreed to
did was I
this?
sent it to the
Yeah,
lawyer,
I'm
and I
just-
said, look, we have to incorporate these in the agreement, or there's no agreement.
Yeah.
So,
But you-
and I haven't heard back.
I'm just trying to take one step at a time, guys. Please help me out here. You're concerned about parking space, what I think is a paramount concern, so that's why I'm trying to take it very simply.
Okay.
Your resolution said subject to these additional conditions. You wrote up these additional conditions. The agreements say no loss of parking spaces. Is that correct? So
Yes.
if perchance there's a loss of parking spaces, your approval for this whole project goes away.
As I understand it, is that the case?
Town attorney, I'm not
Well,
overstating
the
it.
approval stands, but we could, it's in the licensing agreement, so theoretically, they're in breach of the licensing agreement.
Okay,
the
so
access
they got...
You
so
could
there's
take action
backup
if
for
you
that.
wanted.
But the issue is, it's in multiple places then, it's in there that there'll be no loss of parking spaces.
Correct.
I
And
just
it's what-
want the authority to
Yes.
absolutely understand, there's no loss of parking spaces. You wrote it up that way, you passed it that way, you put this in. What's been approved is your words that there's no loss of parking spaces. Are you okay with that?
As long as Green Skies agrees to that in the agreement, and I don't know, I know you, Attorney has written this into the agreement. Has Green Skies approved this in the agreement?
It doesn't matter. Your resolution
fine.
says they don't have authority to do anything. And if I'm misstating this, Stan, let me know.
No, I think
Your
what's
resolution
gonna happen-
your resolution says they don't have authority to do anything if there's any loss of parking spaces. Am I misstating that?
No.
Okay, so we're all in agreement, there's no loss of parking
I
spaces.
have a question about that, because it depends on where it is. In miscellaneous number 6.1, it says, "In the event of a conflict between the provisions of this agreement and those of any exhibit, the provisions of this agreement shall prevail, and such exhibit shall be corrected accordingly." So therefore, that was my question, where is this going to appear? Is it going to appear in exhibit?
In the agreement.
Where it can therefore be basically negated, or is it not?
As I read before, paragraph 4, licensee covenants.
Yep.
Those are things that this company has agreed to do, and that's in the body of the agreement.
It's in the body?
Yes.
Okay.
And that the first one is licensee covenants that there will be no loss of parking spaces as a result of the installation of the system.
I think also,
That's our access license agreement.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
one.
Is our access license agreement an exhibit to the solar purchase power agreement?
No, for your purposes, it's the other way around.
Okay.
okay,
The purchase agreement becomes
it-
an exhibit to
To
this.
this, thank you.
okay. That answers that question. Okay. So in that case,
Thank you. So we're okay, there's no
With
loss
that
of
one.
parking spaces?
Yes.
Thank you. We're okay that the snowplow and the paving can get
Paving
done?
can be done.
the one
Okay,
that's...
thank you. Realize I've taken a few. I just want to be clear on paving, snow plowing, and not a loss of parking spaces. So I'm going to
There's
turn this back.
one other, however, the way that the 4.3 under licensee covenants was written up, one of the things that we all, everyone on the board was absolutely adamant about was this whole business about it having to go from June 1 to September 2nd, and if it couldn't be done then it couldn't be done at all. But the way this writes is that it shall use commercially reasonable efforts to construct the system during the period commencing the day after, da-da-da. And licensee shall use its best efforts to block the fewest parking spaces possible. So that isn't exactly what we said. You know, we were as adamant about the time period as we were about not losing the spaces, but this doesn't sound very adamant.
Okay. Other than saying that's generally accepted wording that I've heard in a bunch of agreements, Mary Kate, if you have other wording that you've heard in your career, I don't know what
deal
else.
with legal stuff usually.
I mean, sometimes there are compensatory damages put in case they don't, and we have to use extraordinary measures to put people
I mean,
in private parking lots, for example.
Did you check with Parks and Rec to see if there are any construction delays when they put solar panels in over there?
I did not check that. It's certainly a
Different.
much
That's-
smaller scaled project. I mean,
Right, but a much tighter time frame. It might be interesting to see what they learned on that construction.
I would love
Jerry's
project.
not down, he's not here
Yeah.
anymore. Okay.
All right, look, I'm not trying to redo what the parking authority
No.
did at your meeting, and certainly you're welcome to have additional discussions on this. I just wanted to clarify a couple points to understand what your discussions were and how those worked and what took place. And I'm sorry, I've chewed up some time here.
No,
Folks,
that's
any
fine.
any other points that you have?
I have other
for-
questions, but they're more related to the cost benefit.
Okay, thank you.
of doing
Thank
this
you.
project.
And since we're getting, would you guys mind if we went to the public just to see if there are any additional comments here? Did you want to have some?
No,
No,
sure.
I'll just say something before you do. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page here, because I was looking at the 14 points that Mr. Bowman provided, and he talks about the detailed description of the proposal, and you, Mr. First Selectman, you put forth the number before, and I want to make sure that that no one's laboring under a misapprehension here. So if you look at 3, it talks about the details. So it's a 1.1 megawatt system. It's going to produce 1,000,003 kilowatt hours of electricity. I assume that's over the course of a year. It's going to supply about 90% of Tomlinson's power needs. This says that the proposal will save Tomlinson $54,000 a year. Okay, that's the number that I've seen. So I want to make sure that I don't know where the $180,000 number came from,
Thank
and I
you
want to
for
make sure that
asking
you
that.
understand that. So we're talking about $1 million over the term of this agreement. It's going to save the town. In addition to that, they're going to pay, they're installing LED lighting, which is apparently better lighting than is there now, at their expense in the parking lot. And they're going to be, what's going to happen is that lighting, from what I understand from Mr. Bowman, is hooked into the Tomlinson meter. So we get a savings on that because this is going to provide 90% of the Tomlinson power. So there's a savings on that. So they save $3,000 a year on lighting. They're also going to pay $12,000 a year to the parking authority. They call it a lease payment. It's not really a lease, but it is a payment. And they're going to get that for the term of this agreement. So
That's part of the 69,000 though, right?
that's yeah, if you add the 3 up, 69,000. So I just, and they're going to put some charging stations that won't
Right,
cost the town
Yeah.
anything.
No,
So those are the benefits. Obviously, there's no cost to the town, no direct cost, because they pay for everything, so, and we're not liable for anything.
No, thank you. I was quoting what I thought was a number I remember from earlier
I know, and I just want to make
presentations, so
sure
thank
that
you.
everyone
No, thank you for
talking about
clarifying.
the same number.
So that's basically 700,000 a year over 10 years.
No.
No, it's
No, no.
$69,000.
A year.
A year.
Right.
Yep,
70,000
A year.
times 10 is 700,000.
Over
So,
10 years, right?
Over 10 years. Sorry.
It's a 20-year agreement.
1.4
It's okay,
million.
I'm just trying to
Yeah.
get to a 10-year
That's
number.
correct.
But thank you. Sorry for my confusion.
The town gets that benefit.
Yep.
So
And-
we want to go to public and then we'll ask some more questions?
If you want,
or-
are you okay with that, or do you
I
want
am
to get
fine
some more
with that.
topics
No,
on
let's go to
public?
public.
The only, I guess I have a simple question, because we've talked to the town a lot about these, the solar units and the amount of energy we save, and this is quite ambitious. So my question is Tomlinson, can we not put solar panels on the roof of Tomlinson to generate the savings? Is that impossible, or I'm assuming we'll generate much less in terms of savings, but can you answer that
Right.
for me?
My recollection is that the Tomlinson, if you put it on the roof, it wouldn't be nearly the savings here. It's
So
just not
the
big enough.
amount of
It's not big
savings.
enough.
But do we have a sense, Mr. Michelangelo, in terms of when we look at other schools and the savings we've generated by using the roof space, just so we have some perspective?
Just trying to get a number of the square footage we have here. We're covering approximately, I think probably around 65,000 square feet of area in the train station parking lot, and that's well up and above the roof area that we could put on Tomlinson. So because Tomlinson's a pretty big user of electricity, it's a large school, but it's sort of a squat.
It's
and-
squat, yeah.
Squat,
It's
and
squat, yeah.
3, sometimes 4 spots. So it doesn't have it doesn't have this amount of roof area to cover it. So just based on the roof area, we probably wouldn't be able to put a quarter of this size on the building itself.
But it is an option for us. If we wanted to generate solar power using the roof of Tomlinson, it's an option that we could consider.
Correct. But once again, because of the vast area of the train station, I know that there was one of those that was targeted early on, and there was quite a bit of intricacies of doing it. And just a couple points about one of the first drawbacks was that there's a wide swath of railroad right-of-way, which is controlled by the Connecticut DOT. So originally it was envisioned that, the carport things would go pretty close to where the train tracks are. But because that issue became complicated and more complicated, this area only goes on parking authority property. So the prime spots, along the tracks themselves, and even the first couple spots in each row, are going to be free. They're not going to be covered from it just because they're not on town property. And there's sort of the swath underneath the Umpqua flyover and a couple areas over there that are left free.
I think the other piece of this to understand is the reason this is part of a state and UI program where this is being provided at no cost to the town. So we're both getting lower electric power costs, but also not having to front any of the installation costs as part of this. So that's one of that, and you've seen that through a number of the programs where we're basically signing power purchase agreements, but we're not investing any town money, town funds. So we're getting a reduction in power costs without having to invest in the infrastructure to produce those.
And just one other question. I've seen these before in town in the parking lot of the rec center,
Yes.
for example. And a benefit is that it provides shelter. I mean, you're covered, correct? So you get out in the snow and the rain, and you've got some coverage that you're protected for. So I just want to bring that up. But aesthetically, I'm just curious. I mean, this is a large amount of space, and I have heard some concerns from people in the neighborhood in terms of the aesthetics of having our train station, our parking lot. I don't know how to describe it, but it will be a big adjustment if this goes forward. And I just don't know enough about what other towns that we've looked at that have done this, and is there anything nearby that we can take a look at or have a look at what it looks like aesthetically? Because I think it's an important consideration for us.
Yeah. And as
we
much
look
as
at
we
our
don't-
downtown.
As much as we don't have the drawings for these, any photos of something similar that's been done?
There are diagrams of what this is going to look
I
like.
saw the diagram and I saw the black and white photo on the back page, this one. I don't know, I think we'll probably hear from folks
Yeah.
in the community, and I think it's important that we do.
Yeah, there are a number of installations. I'm trying to think of the one close. I know that there's, it's not local, but East Hartford High School has a big array in their parking lot. But I'm sure we could find more similar and closer examples for people to take a look at.
Okay, did that question come up at the Parking Authority meeting? Similar installations that could be visited?
I believe they visited one before I was in there.
Well, I think you need to, if, Mary Kay, if you could talk from the mic up here, that would be good.
Before Green Skies, there was a proposal from Incon, and they had an installation up in GE in Plainville. And we did go up to look at that. But I think it was a different shape than this Green Skies one is going to be.
Anything close to this shape?
I think the one that's probably closest is the JCC of New Haven. They just put one in. They started in March. It went operational on June 23rd, I believe. I talked to the chief operating officer a couple of weeks ago about it, to ask whether there were any things that he could suggest. That probably would be the closest. It's in Woodbridge. I haven't gone up to look at it, but that would be the.
But it was done
would be
by
the
Green
closest.
Skies, and they said it was.
It was not done by Green Skies, but it used Solaire, and Solaire is, I believe, the solar panel
Okay, the designer. the
group
product designer.
that we would be using.
Okay.
And so, but they used a different integrator.
Gotcha, but we didn't go
that
look at
wouldn't
that one
affect the
yet.
looks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we didn't go look at that one yet, so, okay. All right, thank you. Joe?
It's a different type design, but Green Skies was the installer on the solar on both sides of the I-95 rest area. So they have a long history. They've probably installed more of these than anybody else in the state.
Given that, did Green Skies, to address Mary Kay's concerns, did you get any feedback on prior installations or reference from Green Skies in terms of how the construction goes, with what's their on-time percentage of completion?
That was one of the things I called to ask him, and he said that they didn't, they ran into some problems because they did it over the winter,
Right,
which they
that's-
were, and so, but other than that, they found Solaire very good to work with, very good about communicating, and that was as far as he went.
Okay,
He
so-
didn't say, I don't think they necessarily had a definite schedule.
Okay, so other than the one winter installation, the others were finished on time. Did they document that at all?
I don't know of others. We asked, Elise and I kind of trolled the web, and we found a J&J installation down in Princeton, and one of the questions that we asked in our list of questions was who we could talk to at J&J, and they came back and they said they had no idea. So, we didn't follow it anymore. And then I found the one up in New Haven.
Thank you. Okay, if we go to
Sure.
public, please. All right, is there any comment from the public? All right, let's start here.
Okay.
And two things. I'm going to ask you to come up to the podium because you need to speak in the mic. And it is our custom to allow public comment. This is not a Q&A type session.
No,
but
I just want to comment.
please.
Thank you. I'm new to this procedure, so if you'll bear with me. I have lived in Mossford for 30 years, and I was a commuter for a long time, so I know both angles of it, both things. And what I would like to ask is a copy of the solar power agreement with the financials to present to the board of Mosswood. We have a lawyer on the board as well as Mosswood has its own lawyer. I see nothing but chaos and confusion out of this, and I am very concerned about the Democratic Party going forth, because if you annoy all of those commuters, it is beyond my comprehension. And as far as Mosswood is concerned, we have been very, very good citizens of this town. We caused no problems, and I mean, the police came and gave a wonderful a lecture to us on safety, and they said, you cause no problems, and there are no incidents here. So to have all that chaos and confusion of the construction from Mosswood to deal with, all the noise and sinking pillars and dust and confusion and cutting off the lights. If you go down to Mill Plain Road and you look at those solar panels, and I used to go to that rec center all the time, when the solar powers went in, it's darker down there. So you're taking away the aesthetics to your point of view. So you're driving, past the people that have to go into the parking lot. The aesthetics are just incredible. But more importantly, I cannot believe that if you sink pillars in there to build these panels, you are not going to take away parking spots. That just doesn't even seem to make sense to me. So I know that you were talking about saving $69,000 a year, but it seems to me the town budget is large enough and rightfully to rebuild Penfield, but I'm sure that cost a lot of the town money in there they're not going to get back. And this does not benefit the Tomlinson children in education, health, or welfare. It only benefits the town in saving approximately $69,000 a year. And I want to point out that mess that happened with the town, I won't go on, the town, extra town train station must have cost this town incredible sums of money. And so to cause confusion and chaos to Mosswood and to cause all that confusion for the commuters, I mean, if the trains are late, the commuters go crazy. So I would very much like to speak to somebody in administration and go over this inch by inch by inch and see what can happen here. I am really concerned about this, and as my family's lived in this town since the 1800s, so I have a love of the town and I have a love of Mosswood, and that's what I have to say.
Ma'am, thank you. Thank you.
Can I just answer that? real quick?
Hold it. Actually, I'd like to get through the other public comments before you...
I just wanted to let her know that that solar power agreement is on the website. She can download it and look at it.
All right, ma'am, did you say your name?
It's Marla Newkirk.
Okay, Jen, do you have that? No. Could you come up to the mic and say your name again, please? I'm sorry.
Sure, it's Marlou, M-A-R-L-O-U, Newkirk, N-E-W-K-I-R-K.
Okay. And thank you very much.
Okay, and I just want to point out, companies go bankrupt all the time. So if this company goes bankrupt somewhere along the line, the town has a lot of responsibility for that.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lisa Rowland. I'm president of Mosswood Association. I'm asking you tonight to table this agreement or to look into it more, especially after what I've heard tonight. Contrary to what you might have thought, we have not been informed about this until last week, and it was actually a unit owner that told us about it. Parking Authority did not come to us. Nobody from the town came to us. So we're still looking through that 146-page PowerPoint agreement, trying to figure out what is going on, how it will impact us. But I can tell you tonight I have some concerns. Number one, aesthetics is very big. Property values are big for us. One thing I thought you did not take into consideration is what happens if we have a bad winter and the snow and the school gets out later. So now you have parking spaces that you cannot use. Sometimes, like you said, we had a bad winter like last year. Also, I know that tonight, if you agree on this, I know it's basically when the Board of Selectmen sees an agreement, they're basically saying, look, we agree with this, we're good with this. Zoning's only going to look for zoning rules or compliance. So I know that tonight is extremely important. I really hope that you have, I see doubts, I hear doubts from what's going on. I really hope that you delay this and let us get a chance to look at it. You get a better chance and a better feel of it, and maybe we can all come together and make an agreement or figure something out. I'm not against green energy. The one thing you have to say, this is a 20-year lease. This is a constant evolving energy. There's different programs. They're now coming out with windows that give off this type of power. I think 20 years is a long commitment. I think you're going to be stuck with something that might be substandard in 20 years. So I think these are things that you should think about. Westport, I know, had put these solar panels on the Westport train station. I have not seen them go in any of the schools. And I think this is actually aggressive, and you're going to put them in all the schools, right? I think somebody had told me that. So this is a big project. Everybody goes in the downtown first thing you see is that train station back from the 1800s. I'm not going to want a metal sleeve on top of it. I mean, it's just not the best place for it, in my opinion. And that's, even though I'm on the board, but that's my own personal opinion. So I hope that you will all take some time to consider and do not approve this tonight, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, just if you'll give us your name and address, please.
Sure. Steve McKay. I live at 245 Unclewood Road, Mosswood, board member, treasurer. I just am aware of, I'm new to this as well, I'm just aware of that there seems to be a lot of questions, and you've asked some really good questions, and it just seems like to vote on this at this point seems a little premature because it sounds like you have a lot of questions. I certainly have questions. You know, one of the things I've heard a lot of generalities, but I don't, 65,000 square feet doesn't equate to me. I don't, what's the percentage of the lot that's being covered? Is it 100% of the lot, 50%? I would like to know are we looking at the entire lot being covered? I'm just wondering if we have done a strong enough cost analysis for snow removal. It's much easier and cost-effective to remove snow from a vacant lot than it is to have to run up and down aisles. And these aisles will now have curbs you can't drive through. When snow is removed and then the snow slides off, these fixtures will come down. You're going to have residual plowing. Someone's going to have to come in and clear that because that's going to be a pile of snow. 2 years ago or 3 years ago, we had a 36-inch snowfall. You couldn't move in this town.
I remember.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. So as this, I don't believe that you'll be able to plow the snow up into underneath this or on end to end because you're going to lose that much more parking. So I would think snow removal is going to be key. And I think we probably need to look a little bit stronger at what's the impact to our cost. I don't know if the town pays for that or the parking authority. I don't know how that's handled. But I would like to say that I hope that tonight you can table this until some more answers, some more questions and answers are put out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Hi, my name is Marjorie Penna. I live in 393 Edison Road in Trumbull, Connecticut, and we own the coffee shop in the Fairfield train station.
Mm-hmm.
And we came out here to listen to everything that was being said. I personally am concerned with the 25% of the parking lot being closed. Now you're talking about 25% of my business getting closed as well. I will be losing customers because you're transferring them to different spots. I understand you guys trying to get shuttle for some places, but you guys are not seeing the other effect that it will cause to the commuters as well to us. I know my commuters come within seconds before the train comes. Now, I already have to suffer with the fact that the train tracks are changing every morning. I lose customers because I can't get coffee because I have to run to the other station to go get the train. So I think you guys should really, really reconsider doing all this because now 25% is going to affect me. It's going to affect my commuters because I think about them. They're always in and out. They're one step at the door, one step at the train already. You got a few seconds where they come in and out. You have to really reconsider about this.
Okay.
You want to put anything?
My name is Joseph Penham. I'm also the owner, also with her, Bright to Shine Coffee Shop. And losing 25% of these customers is a huge factor for our business because if you ask any of those commuters, I would have to say 95% of those commuters come to us on last-minute basis to get their coffee and run onto the train. I mean, if anybody here is a drinker of coffee, at 4 o'clock in the morning, we all know you need that cup of coffee. Yeah. So it's not only the factor of the coffee, but it's the factor of the inconvenience of the customers at the same time, too. And it's bad enough that they also, as we were to complaining about the track change. But when we call the metro people, there's no track work being done. So why is there a track change? It's an inconvenience to these customers. So it's ping pong that's going on. I mean, you got 1 minute. There's one time.
The Metro North issue is one we can't solve for you.
Understood.
But we do understand, based on recent activities, what a problem it is to have to run from one track side to another.
No, absolutely. I mean, and to lose the 25%, and then, I mean, knowing that we have to pay our light, we have to pay, I mean, there's many things that needs to be paid. We got to pay the park authorities. I mean, it's bad enough they don't want to even offer us a parking spot. I mean, but that's something in a different ballgame that we have to talk to about.
Yeah.
But I mean, these are just little things that it's bad business. Bad business for us. It's bad business for the customers. It's something that shouldn't be decided today. This needs to be spoken to a little more longer. A little longer, because one, this is new to us. First, when we first did the contract to the business, we was informed that none of this was going to be touched, of the parking lots. And then we find out from a community that tells us, no, yes, 25% will be touched. Okay, so wait, now what happens to us?
I've been at the coffee shop for more than 8 years. I used to run it for my old boss before we took over, and I seen that place where it was busy. We were nonstop. Now, since you guys did the new Metro North, it has gone down, and it's barely enough for me to make up my rent money, the bills I have to pay for the store, our supplies. You know, you're gonna take another 25% out of us and our commuters.
Yeah, that might be a discussion to have with our friends at the Parking Authority also on that. But it wasn't certainly not
Go ahead.
their fault, but it's not something the Board of Selectmen can address as part of today. But I think you have made your point clear, and I do thank you for coming here and sitting till now to make that point.
Yeah, luckily one of my customers told me about it. In order that I would have never known.
I mean,
Thank you. I think they have a Facebook
Yeah.
page now, too. You might want to get on that.
Yeah,
Oh, you do? We do too as well.
Yeah, we do too also.
Okay, good.
You know what I mean? And the thing is the reason that it's a concern to us is we just finally brought back all the clientele into the building from Metro North also. A lot of them have came back.
Good.
And now the business has produced even better. As she mentioned, the parking lot is flooded every day now. And to go and then put these customers back through that again and take another 25%, it's a ping pong game, and it's inconsiderate ultimately at the end of the day.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. God bless.
All right. Anybody else from the public, please?
Yeah, but it's only because, you know, the project takes longer. So, yeah.
Hi, Elise McKay, 148 Ludlow Road in Fairfield. I wear two hats. I'm here now speaking as a resident of Fairfield, and I just want to say a couple of things that are sort of on my mind. The first is we just have these lovely new historic train station signs that we've put on the entrance in Mill Plain and on Umpqua. And I think aesthetically putting this sort of enormous structure on there sort of is incongruous with a lovely historic train station. So that's just from the aesthetic point of view. I have, you know, a concern about that. I'd also like to know if there's a buyback power arrangement, because I believe, and I'm not a solar panel power expert at all, the most energy that's going to be produced from these solar panels will be happening during the summer months when school is not in session, because that's when the sun is the strongest and it's out the longest. We've just had the clock change. The sun goes down earlier, darker skies, and that will be the peak use of the building will be during, you know, the winter months when I don't expect that as much solar will be produced. So the calculation as to how we arrived at what savings we will be obtaining in Tomlinson, I'd like to know what that was based upon. It was factored in where we are located, and you know, that not just the peak capacity, because a lot of the solar panels are designed to tell you that they are going to produce this much power, and it's based on the sunny day at the equator. I'd also like to say that I think that residents of this community don't really know that this project is underway, and I don't know at what stage they will be given. The whole community, I mean all of Fairfield, because as I understand it, this is not a lease, and so the RTM will not be hearing this. And I think in fairness to the town, this is a huge structure that's going to go right in downtown Fairfield. I think that the more information we can get out about it, I mean, there are positives to this project, I understand that, but I just think in fairness to the town that more people ought to be informed about it. I mean, we've done the best we could to inform commuters about it, and that's a significant number of people, but I think other people in town might be interested in knowing about it, so, thank you.
Next.
Thank you. Scott Thompson, Chairman of the Clean Energy Task Force, 25 Hunter Road. Thank you for all your questions about the project. This has been a labor of love over the last 2 years. We've been trying to work on this project when we first brought it to the Parking Authority, and I want to thank the members of the Parking Authority because I know it may be new to some people in this room, but they've been really drilling into this project in a very positive way, asking the hard questions for a long time, and I think that it's helped to really advance the approach and the understanding. And of course, there's still questions that remain, and that's really the purpose of this decision, is to allow us to take it to that next level so we can even further develop, so the vendor can further develop the details, so we can bring it to the public and have the open discussion around the details so that we can engage the community and allow people to meaningfully participate. I do want to respond to a couple of things, though. The project is net metering, and so peak times of solar really aren't a factor. It's calculated on the whole amount that's produced over the course of a year, and you basically subtract out the amount you use, and so that's basically how the economics work. They're quite precise. One of the things that this hasn't come up tonight, I appreciate the point about some of the benefits of covered parking, because that is something that I've heard from many people I've talked to. They see that as a real positive. A couple of things that haven't been brought up as real positives for this. The structures that will be put in. Right now, the way people come into the parking, they fly, and it's kind of chaotic, and there's a lot of traffic control to make it safe. These structures will actually help, I believe, improve the safety even further. They're basically going to be traffic calming devices that will keep that traffic moving in a safer manner within the facility. Another thing that's very unique about this project is, and why you don't see this up and down Metro North where there are other parking lots, is we have a unique situation where we have a big power user next to our parking facility. So the train station itself doesn't use a lot of power. They can't benefit from the power. So that's why you don't see it in other Metro Norths. Because we have Tomlinson right next to it, that is the key ingredient that makes this project somewhat unique and one that we should really take advantage of. And back to the numbers. I know the number is $69,000, $70,000. That is a exceptionally conservative number. The way the town looks at these calculations is we assume that the cost of power is not going up with time. But I think we all know that 20 years from now, the cost of power will be much higher. And so that's when you do that calculation, and it's probably in the $150,000 to $180,000 range that Mike was recollecting. So I think that is, we're really underestimating the true financial savings, but we're doing that to be conservative, and I think that's a fair way to look at the numbers. But I just want to point that out, that is how the calculations are done. So I, again, want to speak out in support and ask that you allow us to move this ahead so we can engage the real detailed process of the plans, the renderings, because I think when it comes down to it, the key issue here is going to be aesthetics. And let me conclude with that point, which is, I think beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I look at a blacktop parking lot, and I don't see anything that's beautiful. I think some people call these industrial structures. I think when you see them with the sun shining on them and gleaming and producing free renewable power from the sun, or it's not free, we're going to be paying a much reduced price. That's a thing of beauty, and I think that we need to have that discussion, and I think that gets done through the TPZ forum. So again, I speak out in support of this. I think all the questions and concerns that have been raised are valid, and we need to hash those out. The 3-week parking issue sounds like it's very solvable, but it's It's one of the, I would say dozens of issues we've gone through with the parking authority that we haven't fully solved yet, but I think it is solvable. I'm sure that Joe and Ed will be able to work with Mary Kay and come up with a positive resolution on the June parking issue. So again, ask for your support. Thank you.
Anybody else from the public that wants to comment? Mary Kay, this is new information from what you've covered
Yes,
already.
this is just
Okay.
quickly to say that when we first put out information to our commuter base, we put right in there as one of the information points that there was no way that the parking authority could guarantee that everyone would have a place to park during construction. And I've done every bit that I could to try and find spaces, and I still think that will be no way to guarantee for those first 3 weeks and for the last part that we can guarantee that everybody will have a space. The schools have been, will provide something, but, you just can't manufacture places out of a hat. And
But
it would be nice, but
But just under heading of full disclosure, on any day of the week, you can't guarantee all spaces because you sell twice as many permits as you have spaces.
this is correct.
Okay, just, thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else from the public would like to comment? Please?
Hi, my name is Pat Kearns, Kearns, and I also live at Mosswood. I'm on the board at Mosswood, but I'm also on the parking committee at Mosswood. And because we're right alongside the train station, I think we're going to be a target of people. If they're looking for parking spaces, they're going to come around into Mosswood and try to park in. We do have visitor parking spots, but they're not for the public. They're for the people that live in Mosswood.
Friends of Mosswood.
Friends of Mosswood, right? Visitors of Mosswood. That's a huge problem for me, and it's going to make my life very complicated if that happens. I mean, I'm sure it's going to happen anyway, but just something for you to consider. It's going to keep our property manager very busy, going around and figuring out who belongs and who doesn't belong. Just putting it out there.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? All right, back to the board. Any follow-up questions of the board, or?
I have a couple of things that I just like
Okay,
to
if we
bring
ask Mr. Lester to,
Yeah, please.
okay?
Just, I'm not totally familiar with this Ed Bowman was, but, this project is all funded with credits and rebates and things from the state. And I don't know the time frame, but I understand that these are going to expire. And if this is to get done, it has to go through zoning. They have to have time to develop the plans. They have to bring it to zoning. That's going to be a time-consuming process. And I don't say this to put pressure, but I think that this board needs to consider the timing of this. I think if this does not get done this summer, it's done. That's my understanding. I don't know if it's true or not, but for my conversations, I don't know if Mr., or you know anything, Joe, about that. Ed has talked about that a little bit, but I just want you to be aware of that.
When you say it's done, if I can just clarify my understanding of that. What it is we're getting this through a special grant program that the state is working on with UI. Because that grant program may not exist and has certain deadlines in terms of available funding, if we don't meet those installation deadlines, then the program itself may not be available.
And I cannot
Mr. Thompson, is that
represent
roughly correct?
Yeah, that's correct, and I should also add, I believe that the federal tax incentive, which is significant, it's to the tune of 30%. I believe that is only authorized till 2016. It may be reauthorized, but that's a big factor, so, yeah.
Okay, so there's some grant program deadlines where the subsidy that the installation company is getting may go away, which may make it less economical for them, so they may no longer offer that option. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, as far as I know, and again, I don't know the dates, so I can't represent that. The last thing I want to say is that this project is kind of unique because whatever you do here is not appealable. What the parking authority did, that's not appealable. But this has to go to zoning. And, you know, we have an elected board that's going to sit and decide that. The people are all going to be fully heard, and they'll, you know, it's the normal zoning process. And I think, just from a legal standpoint, if you don't authorize this tonight, it's finished and we don't go any further. But if you do, there'll be a full hearing on this, and folks with concerns they'll be able to express them.
Just to clarify your comment, and not to go too much from memory, because I was a member of the zoning board back a few years. Typically, Planning and Zoning Commission has to make decisions on specific criteria. They're one of our more regulated boards. All right?
Yes.
I remember
Could ask
Joe
Mr.
back then.
Devanchik, he might be able to answer any questions on
What
zoning.
are the criteria that zoning will use to make a decision on this project? In not great detail, but if you can identify the categories or areas.
As usual. What I do have for you, though, and I think I sent you an email, is...
You need to speak from the
I'm sorry.
mic when you do
I
that.
forget this. I'll pass it over. Joe Devanchik, Town Plan and Zoning Director. Back in April of this year, there was a code committee review of this project. What that essentially is, you can hand this out to the... I think I did send you an email.
You did.
And the board had, and as a matter of fact, Mary Kay attended that meeting. What this basically is a review of a proposal at a level that just gets comment. It's not approval or denial, but every department in the community that would deal with this at any time during the process reviews preliminary plans, and they make these comments. And what hopefully happens when the applicant, in this instance would be Green Skies, gets these comments, they would adjust their proposals to meet whatever concerns or comments were made by the individual departments. As you can see, it was everyone from the police, fire, planning and zoning, engineering, public works, and building. What happens in the process we're talking about is planning and zoning. The zone, just to back up a little bit, the zone is an industrial zone. That's the underlying zone of this property. The use, as described, is the use of the town of Fairfield that would be permitted on this property, subject to securing what's called a special exception, Section 27 of our regulations. The standards are listed, or at least the requirements for the application, I believe, are listed in that document you have in your hands, and that was part of the thing that was presented and outlined with Green Skies. So they understand the planning process. Just my general understanding, and I think the town attorney did a very good job in explaining it, but these are preliminary plans. These decisions that are ultimately going to be made, the information required needs to have finished, completed plans. A2 surveys, specifically outlining the location of the structures, the setback aspects of it, along with, we also require requirements, the phasing of the proposal. It's very important. And it has been outlined in the conditional approval that the parking authority did approve, but it's a requirement that the commission does on any kind of project that has this type of construction, that there is a phasing plan. And what's important to know is as part of that phasing plan, it talks about the 25% would be included, but this would be a more specific document once they have been able to complete their plans. The process the planning zoning goes through, as outlined by the town attorney, is a public hearing. There's notice, I believe, at the parking authority meeting, the representatives from Mosswood were told that the applicant would address them, I think. Well, one representative I thought was told by Green Skies that they would address Mosswood. Well, right. Well, my point is, that is a standard procedure anyone goes through when they're making an application to Planning and Zoning Commission. They will address the neighbors, which a large one here is Mosswood, and make a presentation to them. My office usually requires this, or at least strongly recommends that you do this, because what you don't want to be is blindsided at a public hearing without knowing what other issues your neighbors have. So my understanding from talking to them, I'm sorry they did not contact Mosswood, but my understanding what the process is, that Ed Bowman and Green Skies was going to make a presentation once they have the plans completed, prior to making their application to Planning and Zoning Commission, to Mosswood, along with addressing any other neighbors or interested people that wanted to know what the plans were going to be about. Once that's done, they will now submit their final plans to the Planning and Zoning Commission. A public hearing would be held. And of course, Mosswood or anybody else would be able to make comments at these hearings.
Are there anywhere in here where the visual aspects of this project would be addressed? Is that under planning and zoning's purview?
There's no architectural standards. It is an industrial zone. However, there's no question the Planning and Zoning Commission listens and tries to review any project. This is, again, it's a relatively unique issue. We're not talking about a building being built where we do have aesthetic requirements and standards in the regulations.
That's the reason for my question.
Excuse me?
That's the reason for my question.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know that there's any there are no architectural standards that say for this type of construction especially, it's an underlying zone being industrial. However, the commission will listen to any concern, and if there's any kind of condition of approval, or if there's any reasonable type of requests that can be made, or adjustments that can be made to maybe address what the Planning and Zoning Commission does is a balancing act. They'll try to do their best to address any comments that are brought up at the public hearings. If aesthetic's one of those, no question, it's a relatively unique situation here. I don't know how aesthetic a carport with solar panels, it's a very interesting description we had about the sun gleaming on it, but I mean, it is what it is. It's not a building, it's not a house, it's a solar structures. I think the commission, frankly, would be more concerned with safety of these structures, which of course is mentioned by the town attorney. After the use, which actually what the Planning and Zoning Commission is approving the use of this property for this, then final plans, building plans, and it's listed in the fire comments, sets of construction plans would be submitted to them so they can secure a building permit. That building permit process it basically requires by state statute to confirm that the structures are safe. This is one of the things the Planning and Zoning Commission are going to be concerned about, not only with the structure themselves, but access. You'll notice in there they're requiring some type of internal traffic circulation plan, not only for vehicles, but for pedestrian activity. That kind of information needs to be submitted to the Planning and Zoning Commission. They will, once they get these referrals, they will refer them to the police department for their comments. So all that will be incorporated in the process in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Again, just going to pure aesthetics of your question, I don't know, there are no specific standards for carport solar structures, but I mean, the commission will listen. Whatever can be done, let's say, to lessen a concern, the commission would absolutely, of course, they always do, would look at that.
Okay. Joe, thank you.
My short,
Unless there's any
winded
questions from my
answers.
colleagues.
No, thank you. That was very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Who wants to speak if you want to go back to public comment?
I'd just like to make one comment.
Okay.
And I don't have to go up there.
Yeah, actually, you do have to go up there. Sorry, and just for the record, normally we don't do two shots at public comment,
I'm
but
sorry.
because of
Okay.
tonight, we'll let you. So
Okay.
I just don't want to establish precedent for other meetings.
No, it's okay. I won't be at other meetings, I don't think. The thing is, if they did not notify, there's their duty to notify Mosswood. It's required, and they did not do that.
Okay, when you say required, may I ask by who?
Well, didn't you just say that Plainville is not required?
It just,
Yeah, I'm sorry. Joe Devonch again. My comment was the Planning and Zoning Commission's, my glasses, I left them.
Oh, good, then it works out.
Planning and Zoning Commission strongly recommends that any kind of application like this, that you address or you contact your neighbors prior to the hearing to make a presentation. The reason why they haven't done that yet is they haven't made an application to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay, that's...
thank you. I just wanted to clarify the
That's
rules and
fine,
regs. That's all.
that's fine.
Sir?
Real quickly, Steve McKay. Just what I wanted to know, what is the notification process if it does move forward? I mean, we're 136 unit owners. I'm imagining all 136 unit owners will be invited to this process. That we need to be notified. We didn't really know that this was happening until somebody notified us about it. So I'm just wondering what that process is.
Okay, thank you. I think that'll be a point of discussion in some of our comments coming up later. Since we open it up, any further public comment? Mr. Thompson, you've been up here a couple times, but please go ahead. Let's just get it all out.
All right. Last 2 points on aesthetics, because just to relay some conversations I've had with Ed Bowman. At the rec center, one of the issues was the color.
Yeah.
And Ed is fully expecting to take input from the community on the color of the columns. You know, those are silver, black, maybe blend in more. You know, whatever the community is looking for there. So that's one. And then we also have precedent in town for putting screening in where people, you know, have a visual that they don't like, and there's been some screening on other solar projects. So I want to put those on the table list.
Can I ask a
ahead.
question? I don't understand what you mean putting screening in. What do you mean by that?
Trees. Shrubs.
Trees, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I was confused by the screens
Yeah.
panels.
So I can't commit for the vendor on that, but I think the color of the paint has been discussed with them, and that's fully on the
Doesn't
table.
that take
Yeah.
up more space, though,
Thank
just
you.
in the parking lot?
You could put the trees on the edge.
Screen mosswood, yeah.
Probably screen mosswood.
Thank
Trying
you.
to-
Okay,
trying to
now.
screen it from
Thank
the
you,
color.
it's getting late.
It's okay.
I got you,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you.
Back to the board here.
Okay.
Let me throw this out there. One, I'm really uncomfortable with the communication process that's gone through. I'm uncomfortable with where the parking, the alternative source of parking, if that has not been really explored, defined, or gotten more quantitative. We've talked before, and we did it in the, down by the par 3 golf course, when we did down there, that we wanted to see a presentation of the neighbors. That
Yeah,
helped the
South
neighbors
Pine Creek.
understand what was taking
We
place.
did that, that's correct.
And also caused some changes to the project as it went through.
And the neighbors were happy in the end.
And so I'm looking at
Yes, they
two
were.
constituencies here that haven't been communicated with. One is the Mosswood group, but also the commuters, in terms
Absolutely.
of what's taken place. And that came out clearly during our recent tour of commuters. Three, I'm less comfortable with planning and zoning, and that was kind of part of my question to Mr. Devanchek, because planning and zoning has certain criteria that they're going to judge this on. And they're very, you know, it's almost like a regulated board from that standpoint. And I'm not frankly comfortable with just passing this on with a number of open questions, and without, frankly, this board having a clear understanding of what's taking place. So when I look at kind of all of that, I think it's one of the challenges is Attorney Lester pointed out, is that it takes a certain amount of money to put together the presentation. They want to have some security that it's moving forward, so they want to have an approval by this board. But for this board to have an approval, I'd like to have more understanding of what this is going to look like, what the impact is, what's taking place. And I just don't get it from these packets that we have in front of us. I buy the fact that electric power costs are going to go up over time, so that maybe the 70,000 isn't the final number on this, maybe it's more over time. And certainly, you know, during budget time, when we're looking to find an extra 70,000 to cut in the budget, it would be nice to be able to take it out of electricity, because we know we still have the electricity, so we haven't had to cut services, we still get it. So I'm probably more comfortable on the financial side. It doesn't cost us any money, we save $70,000. But from a functional standpoint, in terms of what it's doing to our community, and I buy the fact, and I don't know if somebody said it, I heard this, regardless of whether somebody said it this way exactly, I look at the train stations as gateways to our community. All right? And I think one of the goals there is to make sure that our gateway is as beautiful, as attractive, and welcoming as any train station along the Metro North line. I think we can do that. I don't think that costs lots of money. And my concern is, what's this going to look like? And right now, as I sit here, I don't have a good mental picture, and I don't see a good diagram, and I'm not really comfortable with those pictures, because I thought those looked like flat roofs, and it was my impression or understanding that these wouldn't be flat.
They're Vs. There's a drawing in.
Okay, but I don't.
Yeah, they're Vs.
Yeah. So, from my standpoint, I guess I'm looking for a clearer, simpler presentation to take us through and lay this stuff out. And some of the simple things, like how's the snow plowing going to work, that type of thing, that I'm concerned that the parking authority still has as many questions as they have. Even though they've had their presentation, and they voted on it to accept it, I'd like to get some of the stuff clear in my mind, and specifically with the commuters, I kind of want to know where they're going to park when we do this. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. And I would, you know, probably make a motion to postpone this till we get those answers.
Okay. It's late, we've been here since 4:30, so I won't repeat what you said, but I agree with everything you said. And in addition to that, when you look at the contract, which is one point you didn't touch on, it's a contract that's got a lot of conditions to it that have not yet been even entered into it, let alone agreed to and implemented. So that gives me pause just on its own, that we have kind of a loose contract at this point, because the company hasn't come back and said, we agree to these things, let's put them in and let's move forward with the paperwork. So that concerns me as well. So it just sounds like, in addition to the comments that Mr. Tetro made, in consideration for the neighborhood, for the commuters, and for the town at large, as much as I and this board has supported every green project that's come before us with enthusiasm, the savings, the right thing to do, saving the planet, I think this one just needs a little more time to percolate, and I think we need some more input and some more, legal consideration and thoughtful consideration for the entire town. So I would agree that pushing this off to a date certain makes sense.
I'm going to make that unanimous. I'm glad we're reaching consensus on this. And I would just hammer home what Mr. Kiley said in terms of, we don't have an answer in terms of the conditions that we've put forth, and I don't feel at all comfortable without knowing the reaction to those conditions, number one. Number two, I understand where town planning and zoning is coming from in terms of you will vet these issues fully, but you do follow certain standards, and that aesthetic aspect that you mentioned, I mean, to me, that needs to be fully vetted. And I understand that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I mean, it's green, it can be beautiful, but I think we really owe it to the people in this town to fully understand their perspective on not just what it will mean aesthetically, but as Mr. Tetro laid out, I mean, this could be very disruptive to our commuters, and we need to figure this out before kind of passing it on to town planning and zoning.
Please do.
So, do you want to make that a motion?
I will. Do you have a preference on date, since
I'm thinking two weeks might be too quick to get...
Well, I guess, just a question, you have, there are a lot of questions that were raised. It would probably be worthwhile to, put something together in terms of what we need answers to.
The process,
Exact, the
right.
process.
Right.
Because
Well,
we're
simply put,
asking for a lot of information here, a lot of
Right.
answers.
Well, I
We may
think-
not have the answers from the
It might
company
take-
in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
I
simply
mean,
put, from my standpoint, I'm looking for a presentation to the community, Mosswood, and a presentation to the commuters at some level
Right.
I think that makes sense.
before that, because there were just way too many commuters, and some of these are knowns. I think there's some answers to what the community's asking. But I think we need to have those, and I think from the commuter standpoint, having the alternative parking piece nailed down a little bit better probably makes sense, because commuters, from what I've heard, are frankly concerned about their parking spaces. And if we can't
Absolutely.
provide them parking spaces...
And access to easy access to the train station. That's another huge concern that's come out, without equipment and disruption.
So why don't we...
Is the December 2nd meeting sufficient time? That's about a month.
Actually, I'm going to go back and suggest we do this. I'm going to suggest that we ask that there's a presentation to the commuters, and that there's a presentation to the Umpqua community. I'm going to suggest that perhaps we don't postpone it to a date certain, that in fact we take no action.
Okay.
And that lets those two things happen.
And then you can
The sooner they happen,
figure
the
out-
sooner we
yeah.
can reschedule, come back here. So we're not voting it down, and we're not postponing it. That sets us on some sort of treadmill of when it comes back. But
Sure.
we get those things done so that we get a better clarity on behalf of the neighborhood in terms of what this is going to happen, what the impact is.
Agreed.
Good.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
If that works, then I think we're done talking about it.
Agreed. Thank you.
All right? Thank you. Next item. And Jen, will you please make sure that we get those action items out to Mr. Bowman? Those are all here. I am looking for the agenda, guys.
The taxes.
It's the taxes.
Here.
Oh, that's right. I took yours, Mike,
Oh,
sorry.
that's why it is. That's
Sorry
why I'm
about
missing
that.
it. Thank you.
A parting shot.
Next item up, from the tax collector, to consider and act upon tax refunds as recommended by the tax collector in the amount recommended. I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any amendments?
I'd like to make an amendment to delete the period at the end of the sentence and add a comma followed by $3,435.99.
Thank you.
Second.
All right. Any discussion on the amendment? All in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
The item as amended stands before us. Any further discussion?
No.
All right. All in favor of the item as amended?
Aye.
All right, that's done. Thank you. Next up is private executive session with the town attorney. Thank you all. May I ask everybody to leave except for the town attorney?
I am going to need to take a bio break.
Yeah.